Welcome back. Good morning, everybody. So, at the moment, we are still waiting. Shortly, another few minutes, we will be starting this seminar.
Recording in progress.
I would like to update you that at the moment we have 569 participants on Zoom, and we also have more than 50 participants for YouTube channel. So we will be starting very shortly. I hope you can accommodate yourself with some drinks, notes, and anything that you think might be needed. See you shortly. Thank you. the International Seminar on Marine Mammal Threats, Marine Debris and Ocean Noise on Wednesday, 30th of June, 2021 will begin soon. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Ladies and gentlemen, all participants, speakers, and committee members, please let me introduce myself before we start the event. My name is Suci Lestari London, and it is truly an honor for me to be able to assist as the MC as well as moderator in this international seminar on marine mammal threats. Before we start, I would like to mention several seminar rules for participants. We would like all participants to always turn off the microphone, audio, and the camera, video features during the webinar. Please also make sure that you turn off or silent your phones during the seminar. For questions that wanted to be raised for participants in Zoom, please use the question and answer feature by writing your full name and the name of the speakers to be asked. Meanwhile, for YouTube, you can send the questions through the Slido application, where the link will be sent via chat on YouTube by the team. Next, the link for attendance list to be filled will be shared at the end of the webinar and close at 1 p.m. Jakarta time. This is very crucial. We would like to remind you to stay until the end of the event because the certificate and the links for materials will only be given to those who filled up the attendance list. Next, this is also a very important one. Please select Bahasa Indonesia in the interpretation feature. This is only applied for Zoom if you need a translation into Indonesian. So here we already have a translator and interpreter ready, but it is only for Zoom feature. Make sure you know how to use the feature. Link for materials can be accessed through the link that you can see on the screen. And don't worry, it will also be put in the chat room. And the last but not least, certificate will be sent to the email of participants. And again, I would like to remind you, it will only be sent for those who fill the attendance list and stayed until the end of the seminar. Thank you very much. Now let's get back. So, I would like to start with some prologue. Indonesia waters are inhabited by marine mammals, cetaceans, and sirenia, where a migration route for 1/3 of 90 marine mammal species in the world. Marine mammals, whale and dolphin, have important ecological contribution to the Earth's ecosystems and humans who use or associate with these animals. In order to have better understanding on the problems and threats to marine mammals, especially on marine debris, ocean noise, and bycatch, today the MMAF is conducting international seminars to obtain more information from various international experts to strengthen national mitigation measures and to support joint efforts among countries. This seminar is made possible by the cooperation of Ministry of Marine Affairs and Fisheries in Indonesia, MMAF, WWF Indonesia, and supported as well by Planet Deep. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we will be starting with the official report by Dr. Hendra Yusransiri, the Acting Director General of Marine Spatial Management of MMAF. Bapak Hendra Yusransiri, we would like to ask the honor for you. Thank you very much.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Om Swastiastu, Namo Buddhaya, salam kebajikan dan salam sehat semua bagi kita. Selamat pagi dan salam sejahtera untuk kita semua. Pak Menteri yang kami hormati, serta para hadirin sekalian, mohon izin kami menyampaikan laporan pelaksanaan kegiatan ini di dalam bahasa Inggris. Atas perkenan Bapak Menteri, kami ucapkan terima kasih. Excellency Minister, Minister of Marine Affairs and Fisheries, Republic of Indonesia, Bapak Sakti Wahyu Trenggono, distinguished guests, senior official from invited ministries and Ministry of Marine Affairs and Fisheries of Indonesia, representative from CIFDEC, CTICFF and conservation partners, panelists, researchers, experts, ladies and gentlemen. I wish a very good morning, peace and prosperity be upon all of us. First of all, we thank God for His mercy and blessing that we are able to gather in this event, despite we are still dealing with a true and challenging situation, particularly the last few days as a COVID-19 cases have climbed in Indonesia. Excellency Ministers, today we hold this online international seminar titled Marine Mammals, Threats, Marine Debris and Ocean Noise, due to the increasing concern over the marine mammals sustainability in our country and in most of international waters. Public attention arose as sighting of these charismatic species in our coastal waters are increasingly documented with the little information about this reason. Hence, the discourse over this marine megafauna become more intense, particularly, of course, in the social media, when a coastal community discover as trending marine mammals nearby their settlement. Since 2015, we have recorded approximately 100 annual stranding cases, so biannually about 16 to 20 cases. So this has raised question on why do they strand it and how could we mitigate this case in the future. We have discussed with our local expert about this in the past month and concluded that marine debris and ocean noise are amongst the most probable causes. Thus, today, we wish to enrich our views from various experts and practitioners, namely Dr. Kathy George of the U.S. Marine Mammal Center, Benjamin Kahn from the Planet Deep, Professor McCauley from the Curtin University, Dr. Dennis Hardesty from CSIRO Ocean and Atmosphere, and the last but not least, Dr. Imam Mustafa from WWF Indonesia. Unfortunately, Dr. Coral Palmer from the Charles Darwin University cannot make it to join us today, as she informed our team very recently that she is on urgent marine mammal fieldwork with the internet connection unavailable. So we are still on the field. Excellency, this seminar is organized as Mbak Suci mentioned that by the Ministry of Marine Affairs and Fisheries, supported by the WWF Indonesia and Planet Deep as a core partners. I will therefore express my gratitude to them and to all stakeholders contributing to this event with hope that we can continue our work together in the future to save our marine mammal, our charismatic mammal. The aim of the seminar, first, to exchange information and lesson learned from various speakers about the threat of the marine mammals, especially from anthropogenic activities or man-made impact, such as marine debris and ocean noise, and mitigation measures. Second, to disseminate the conservation marine mammals and their habitat. Minister would like to inform that participants of this seminar is open for general public and official government invitees. I've been advised that recent report from the organizer team that more than 1,400 have a part registered online, and 30 is now attending online. Excellency, since 2015, Directorate General of Marine Special Management has formed quick response team under our technical implementation unit of our UPT, a coordination across the country to handle marine biota gases, including stranding event that require immediate action. Especially Directorate Marine Conservation and Biodiversity has also developed a technical assistance for this matter. On June Our team has trained and educated local coastal communities in Cirebon, which is one of stranding hotspot right now in Java Island. Soon, we will also conduct a technical training as well for the local people in other marine mammal stranding hotspots such as Tulung Agung in East Java. And we hope that through this way, we expect to engage a lot with local coastal community, as we do aware that they are the frontier for the stranding event occurs. As part of our engagement strategy over the period of 2019-2020, we have provided support and assistance to about 38 local conservation communities through the program what we call is Kelompok Masyarakat Penggerak Konservasi, or KOMPAK program. In return, we expect these local community groups to help us in return by actively participate in safeguarding of more than 20 million hectares marine protected area that we have allocated to date. Excellency, as part of actions mandated by the Ministry of Marine Affairs and Fisheries Decree number 79, year 2018, about the Marine Mammal National Plan of Action, or MPOA, we have also involved various institutions in taking care of our marine mammal, such as Airlangga University in Surabaya, Vet Association or Persatuan Dokter Hewan Indonesia, Whale Stranding Indonesia, WSI, Marine Corps, and amongst others. Formally, most of them have been included as part of our MPOA task force enacted by the Minister of Marine Affairs and Fisheries Decree number 14, 2020. I may also inform that all marine mammal NPOA task force member is also invited and present today in this event. We will conduct regular task force meeting in coming month and will then submit to the report to the Excellency Minister. To conclude this report, I will cordially invite the Excellency Minister to convey welcoming remark, directions, guidance, as well to officially open this online seminar. Wabillahi taufiq wal hidayah. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Om Santi Santi Om.
We would like to convey our thank you to Bapak Dr. Hendra Yusran Siri for the official report. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, now we will be hearing the remarks as well as the opening of our seminar by the expert staff of Ecology and Marine Biodiversity, Dr. Insinyur Pamuji Lestari MSc, or we always call Ibu Tari, representing the Ministry of Marine Affairs and Fisheries of Indonesia. Thank you, Ibu.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Selamat pagi, salam sejahtera untuk kita semua. Pertama-tama saya menyampaikan permohonan maaf dari Menteri Kelautan dan Perikanan Indonesia, Bapak Sakti Wahyu Trenggono, karena tidak dapat menghadiri kegiatan ini berhubung ada agenda lain yang sangat mendesak. Beliau meminta saya untuk mewakili pada acara yang sangat terhormat ini. Izinkan saya, Pamuji Lestari, staf ahli Menteri bidang ekologi dan sumber daya laut untuk membacakan sambutan beliau. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Om Swastiastu, Namo Buddhaya, salam kebajikan. Selamat pagi, salam sejahtera bagi kita semua. Yang saya hormati, para pejabat eselon 1, staf khusus, dan pejabat eselon 2, lingkup Kementerian Kelautan dan Perikanan. Para pejabat eselon 1 dan 2, Kementerian Lembaga atau yang mewakili. Para narasumber, akademisi, dan peneliti. Perwakilan dari SIFDEC, CTI-CFF, dan para mitra konservasi, khususnya WWF Indonesia dan Planet Deep, para hadirin sekalian. Puji syukur marilah kita panjatkan kehadirat Allah Subhanahu wa taala, karena atas rahmat dan karunia-Nya kita dapat hadir bersama pada pagi hari ini dalam keadaan sehat walafiat di tengah situasi pandemi COVID-19 yang sepertinya belum ada tanda-tanda akan mereda dalam waktu dekat ini. Atas nama Kementerian Kelautan dan Perikanan, saya mengucapkan selamat datang kepada seluruh peserta pada acara International Seminar on Marine Mammals, Threats, Marine Debris, and Ocean Noise. Saya sampaikan apresiasi yang tinggi kepada mitra kami, yaitu WWF Indonesia serta Planet Deep, yang telah membantu dan mendukung Kementerian Kelautan dan Perikanan dalam kegiatan yang sangat luar biasa ini. Saya juga mengucapkan terima kasih kepada para narasumber yang bersedia meluangkan waktu dan pikiran untuk berbagi pengetahuan dan pengalamannya terkait konservasi mamalia laut. Yang pertama, Dr. Kathy George, the US Marine Mammals Center. Yang kedua, Mr. Benjamin Khan dari Planet Deep. Ketiga, Prof. Macaulay, Carleton University. Yang keempat, Dr. Dennis Hardesti, Cisairo Oceans and Atmosphere, dan Dr. Imam Mustafa dari WWF Indonesia. Saya yakin bahwa meskipun kita ini berada dalam zona waktu yang sangat berbeda, misi kita sama, yaitu menyelamatkan mamalia laut. Bapak, Ibu, dan hadirin yang saya banggakan, pada kesempatan yang baik ini, saya ingin mengingatkan kita semua atas arahan Bapak Presiden Joko Widodo pada acara Musyawarah Rencana Pembangunan Nasional atau Musrenbang pada tanggal 4 Mei 2021 yang lalu, bahwa kita harus memanfaatkan sumber daya alam kita secara bijak dan berkelanjutan dalam pembangunan. Dengan demikian, tidak hanya generasi saat ini yang dapat merasakan manfaat sumber daya alam kita, tetapi juga generasi yang akan datang. Untuk itu, saya ingin menggarisbawahi pentingnya kita menerapkan prinsip ekonomi biru, Sustainable Blue Economy, dengan sektor kelautan dan perikanan sebagai pilar pembangunan. Sehubungan dengan hal tersebut, Kementerian Kelautan dan Perikanan telah melaksanakan sejumlah terobosan konservasi, antara lain yang pertama, wisata berbasis konservasi seperti wisata hiu dan wisata parimanta. Meskipun kedua jenis ikan ini telah dilindungi penuh, namun masyarakat mendapat manfaat ekonomi dari wisata menyelam. Silakan berkunjung ke sejumlah tempat eksotik seperti di Bone Bolango, Gorontalo, dan Nusa Penida, Bali. Yang kedua, penerapan zonasi kawasan konservasi. Melalui pengaturan zonasi ini, masyarakat tetap dapat menangkap ikan di dalam kawasan konservasi dengan aturan tertentu seperti penggunaan alat tangkap yang ramah lingkungan. Yang ketiga, penerimaan negara bukan pajak atau PNBP dari sektor konservasi, baik dari pemanfaatan kawasan konservasi maupun dari pemanfaatan jenis ikan, sehingga negara tetap mendapat keuntungan dan perlindungan jenis ikan. Yang keempat, memberikan bantuan sarana dan prasarana kepada masyarakat pesisir melalui program Kelompok Masyarakat Penggerak Konservasi atau KOMPAK. Kami berharap agar mereka dapat berperan sebagai pemenang lokal atau local champion yang akan menyebarkan prinsip konservasi berbasis Sustainable Blue Economy kepada kelompok masyarakat lainnya. Hadirin yang saya hormati, perairan Indonesia merupakan salah satu hotspot habitat penting bagi mamalia laut. Sekitar 35 jenis mamalia laut diketahui berada atau melintas di perairan Indonesia. Oleh karena itu, kejadian kemunculan atau terlihatnya biota laut eksotis ini di wilayah perairan pesisir kita merupakan hal yang cukup wajar. Tidak hanya kemunculan mamalia laut, pada kurun waktu 1 dekade terakhir, kita juga kerap menyaksikan terdamparnya biota ini di wilayah pesisir. Pada beberapa kasus, melalui upaya nekropsi, tim KKP memang dapat mengupas penyebab kematiannya, namun penyebab pasti dari masing-masing kejadian masih cukup sulit untuk diketahui. Sejak tahun 2015 hingga saat ini, sekitar 52,2% paus yang terdampar di pesisir Indonesia dapat kita selamatkan atau kita kembalikan ke laut. Beberapa waktu yang lalu, tim KKP telah melakukan diskusi bersama para pakar dan peneliti nasional untuk membahas ancaman terhadap keberlanjutan mamalia laut ini. Pada pertemuan tersebut ada 2 poin yang teridentifikasi sebagai ancaman mamalia laut, yaitu polusi gelombang suara atau ocean noise dan sampah laut atau marine debris. Pada hari ini kita akan memperdalam topik tersebut dan mendengar pandangan, pengetahuan, dan pengalaman lebih banyak, terutama dari para pakar luar negeri. Sebagaimana kita ketahui bersama bahwa tidak seperti hewan endemik, hewan bermigrasi jauh seperti mamalia laut ini perlu mendapat perhatian global. Bapak Ibu sekalian, pemerintah Indonesia telah menetapkan mamalia laut sebagai jenis ikan dilindungi sejak tahun 1999, yang berarti bahwa pemanfaatan langsung biota ini dilarang sama sekali. KKP telah menerbitkan keputusan Menteri Kelautan dan Perikanan nomor 79 tahun 2018 tentang Rencana Aksi Nasional atau RAN Mamalia Laut yang memuat aksi-aksi prioritas dalam kurun waktu 5 tahun pelaksanaan RAN 2018 sampai 2022. KKP juga telah memperkuat RAN tersebut dengan membentuk kelompok kerja atau Pokja RAN Mamalia Laut yang telah ditetapkan melalui keputusan Menteri Kelautan dan Perikanan nomor 14 tahun 2020. Setiap tahun, Pokja ini mengevaluasi implementasi RAN dan mengidentifikasi hambatan, tantangan sekaligus mencarikan solusi atas pelaksanaan RAN ini. Pemerintah Indonesia juga telah menunjukkan komitmennya melalui penetapan berbagai regulasi, termasuk komitmen untuk menurunkan 70% sampah laut pada tahun 2025. Sebagaimana termuat dalam Peraturan Presiden nomor 83 tahun 2018 tentang penanganan sampah laut. Kami juga berkomitmen kuat dalam pengembangan dan pengelolaan kawasan konservasi dengan menyiapkan peta jalan menuju penetapan kawasan konservasi seluas 30 juta hektar. Hadirin yang berbahagia, sekali lagi saya menyambut baik pelaksanaan seminar ini. Saya berharap seluruh peserta dapat memanfaatkan waktu dengan baik, terutama dalam sesi diskusi sebagai wadah pertukaran informasi. Akhirnya, dengan mengucapkan Bismillahirrohmanirrohim, dengan ini acara International Seminar on Marine Mammals, Marine Debris and Ocean Noise secara resmi saya nyatakan dibuka. Salam sehat, salam konservasi. Wabillahi wa taufiq wal hidayah. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Om Santi Santi Om. Menteri Kelautan dan Perikanan Republik Indonesia, Sakti Wahyu Trenggono. Terima kasih.
Thank you very much, Ibu Tari, for the time and also for His Excellency for the support that has been given. We know that you might be very busy, so the time that you have given is very precious to us. Okay, next. One step in order to ensure better effort of marine conservation will be done with the acknowledgement on cooperation agreement between the Directorate General of Marine Spatial Management of MMAF and WWF Indonesia. Now, before the acknowledgement takes place, Mr. Alexander S. Rusli, as the chairperson of the Executive Board of WWF Indonesia, will be giving short remarks. We will be checking whether already connected with Bapak Alex.
Yes, hopefully you can hear me well. Thank you so much. Terima kasih. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Selamat pagi, salam sejahtera untuk kita semua. Om Swastiastu, Namo Buddhaya, salam kebaikan. Your Excellency, Minister of Marine Affairs and Fisheries, Sakti Wahyu Trenggono, who is presented today by Dr. Tari Pamuji Lestari, Dr. Pransiri, Director General of Marine Spatial Management of the Ministry, who's been our great partner in this collaboration today. All the echelon 1 and 2 of the ministry and other ministries as well may be present today. Fellow speakers, experts, friends, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished participants. First of all, allow me to begin with an apology that I cannot be there myself with the head of Marine. That given the pandemic, that we're in isolation given our houses have been affected by the pandemic. Nevertheless, we believe that the good effort today needs to continue, and we're still blessed to be able to soldier on and try to solve the issues around us. Given that despite of COVID, life must go on, sustainability of our ecosystem must continue. We're honored to have the opportunity to be part of this international seminar and to be involved in the great discussions about the importance of marine mammal conservation and how we, as Indonesians, have done a lot to preserve the marine megafauna of God's extraordinary creation. And through this event, the Ministry of Marine Affairs and Fisheries has shown that Indonesia is advanced in the conservation of marine species, which are not only important for our ecosystem, but also shows how Indonesia plays a major role in protecting the Indonesian seas, which is home to a tremendous marine species and is an important world food resource, especially for our community. WWF, along with NGO partners such as CTC, WCS, CI, YCAN, and RARE, as well as many related partners, fully support the Indonesian government in conserving this wealth for our nation as well as for the world. As part of the initiatives to preserve the marine life, we work collaboratively with the community, local government, and professional groups of Indonesian veterinarians to monitor the incidents and rescue these species stranding in various locations across the nation. Between 2015 and 2020, the flying vet and first responder teams recorded 466 stranded incidents, mostly occurred around Bali, Kalimantan Timur, Papua Barat, and NTT. From those handled events, 60% were being handled by the first responder team with a survival rate of more than 90%. Unfortunately, in some cases, stranding species are already sick or dead. To mitigate this issue moving forward. Currently, there are 1,300 first responders and 55 veterinarians of flying vet in service to respond any upcoming marine megafauna stranding event. However, due to vast area, Indonesia will need more numbers of both first responders and flying vets. The data collected together was submitted to the Ministry of Marine Affairs and Fisheries as an input in the development of the National Plan of Action for the Conservation of Indonesian Marine Mammals. On other issues, WWF Indonesia partners with various organizations and community groups also support the government's effort in developing marine protected areas, which are important habitats for the world's marine mammals. WWF Indonesia truly appreciates the Ministry of Marine Affairs and Fisheries for embracing many partners in an effort to preserve the sea and its resources. And we expect our greatest appreciation to the Minister of Marine Affairs and Fisheries and to the Director General of Marine Spatial Management. And today, WWF Indonesia Foundation and the Director General of Marine Spatial Planning will sign a mutually supportive cooperation agreement for the conservation of Indonesia's marine resources. This cooperation agreement demonstrates that KKP and WWF Indonesia the collaboration for various forms of activities related to marine protected area conservation, activities to improve fishery practices to be more sustainable, marine animal protection activities, and various research and community empowerment programs. For this collaboration, on behalf of Yayasan WWF Indonesia, I would like to express our deepest gratitude, and hopefully God will bless this collaboration and will provide the results that we all expect for the government, for the people in Indonesia, and for the whole world, and in future generations. In this opportunity, lastly, I would like to also wish a good seminar to all the speakers, the experts who are today are an inspiration and guidance for us to be able to move forward in the future. Hopefully, we'll be able to continue to support each other in making our world a better place. Terima kasih. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you very much for Pak Alex for your time and support. We will now proceed to the acknowledgement of the MOU that will be conducted by Dr. Hendra Yusransiri, representing Directorate of Marine Spatial Management, and Bapak Irwan Gunawan, Head of Program for WWF Indonesia. We also would like to welcome and invite Ibu Dr. Insinyur Pamuji Lestari, MSc, to come forward to witness the MOU process. Just for information, the MOU is actually concerning about whale as one part of it, and this is as a legacy to prove that Indonesia has tried its best in protecting marine mammals. We would like to welcome Bapak Hendra, Bapak Irwan, and Ibu Tari. Bapak Alex, maybe you can turn your virtual background. We see here that the signing of MOU is taking place, and we do hope that the protection of marine mammals in Indonesia will be even better in the future with this MOU. And let us give our best support to ensure the protection of marine mammals of Indonesia. Thank you very much to Bapak Hendra, Ibu Tari, and Bapak Irwan. Thank you very much, Bapak and Ibu. So, as we hope this will be the legacy that Indonesia will continue to be even better in the future. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, now, before we begin with our main event, which are the presentations, we would like to have a break group photos here, maybe involving the panelists and organizers. The team already set up everything. So for the panelists and organizers, please give your best smile, showing your high spirit and showing that we can get through this pandemic. Okay? Is the team ready for the break group photos? Okay, we would like to ask again the presence of Bapak Hendra, Ibu Tari, Bapak Andi, and several of the organizing committee to come forward so we can take the picture. And shortly after this we will start. Wow, Ibu Tari, luar biasa. Very energetic and very high-spirited. Okay? Okay, I will count. 1, 2, 3, smile. Even though maybe in the mask you can't really smile. Again, 1, 2, 3. Yeah. Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, please bear with us. Yeah. Thank you very much to Bapak and Ibu. Okay, before we start the first session, I would like to again remind you for the seminar rules. Please make sure that you turn off the microphone and the camera features as well as your mobile phone to be silent for those who are in the room. And then for questions, you can use the Q&A feature. During the presentation, you can start asking questions. For Zoom, you can use the Q&A feature. For YouTube, there will be a link to use the Slido. And only for Zoom, you can use the interpretation feature. I can see here, it's like a globe, a round thing, where you can press and then you can hear the presentation that will be presented in English into Bahasa Indonesia. And again, the attendant link will end of the webinar. Okay? Okay, before we start, I would like to give a fun fact just to start. Do you know that the biggest living animal on earth is blue whale, and it can reach up to 25 meters? That's fun fact 1. I'll be back with the next fun fact. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we will be starting our presentation. We have a very special person to start the presentation. The team will have the profile of this special person. All are specials, of course. Soon, maybe the team can have the profile of Bapak Benjamin Khan ready. I will be reading. Yeah. Bapak Benjamin Khan, MSc, is the director of Apex Environmental and Planet Deep ORG. He will be presenting overview of marine mammals threats in Indonesia. Pak Ben, we call him Pak Ben, is specializing in oceanic cetaceans who has lived and worked in Indonesia for almost 2 decades and has an intimate knowledge of the coral triangle. He is the director of Apex Environmental and co-founder of Planet Deep, as well as serving on 2 IUCN commissions and 3 IUCN specialist groups. In his free time, he is an avid diver, blue water sailor, and novice kite surfer. Very nice. He works on migration corridors, seamounts, and productive offshore upwelling regions, and to include these oceanic hotspots in large-scale conservation plans and marine protected area networks. He has been conducting visual and acoustic surveys and ecological research in the Indo-Pacific region, particularly Indonesia, since 1998. His current focus is on the identification of oceanic cetacean hotspots and promoting their inclusion in the region's marine protected area network, and has recently embarked upon a pioneering study to tag blue and sperm whales and track their movements and behavior in order to better protect the critical whale habitats in the coral triangle. On a regional level, Benjamin works on policy development for whale conservation and best practices for ocean industries that operate in the sensitive waters of the Coral Triangle, ranging from shipping to offshore energy, oil and gas, to marine tourism. Okay, I would like to greet Pak Ben. Hello, Pak Ben, can you hear me?
Yes, Suchi.
Yes, Pak Ben.
Yeah.
How are you,
Can
Bapak?
you hear me? I'm fine, thank you.
Yeah.
Can you hear me okay?
I think we can hear you okay and clearly, and without do further, I think everybody already cannot wait to hear for your presentation, Bapak. So we give the floor to you. Thank you very much, Pak Ben, for your time.
Oh, thanks. I appreciate that. There's quite a delay on my screen. I just want to double check whether that is not the case for yourself and everyone. All right, well, here it goes. Well, I'd like to start with a word of thanks. I would like to thank the organizers, and especially the Ministry of Marine Affairs and Fisheries, our sponsors, WWF Indonesia and Planet Deep. I'm very grateful for this opportunity to work closely with you over the last period, and with a special thanks to His Excellency Minister Trenggono. Thank you for your support, as well as Dr. Hendra Siri and Pak Andi Rosandi, and also, last but certainly not least, Ahmad and the team at the Department of Marine Conservation and Biodiversity, who have put this all together under a really challenging COVID situation. So a big thank you. I will start my screen sharing now to present. That. Okay.
Yeah, we can see the presentation here, Pak Ben.
Oh, good. Thank you. Thank you for that confirmation. It's a bit difficult here to see what's going on the other end, but I'm glad this is all working out with the technology. That was my my gratitude. So I put that up there. Let me start by providing some context to this overview of threats to Indonesia's marine mammals. Now, Indonesia has a population of about 270 million people. It is the fourth most populous country. Geographically, Indonesia is the largest archipelago on Earth. It's got over 17,000 islands. It spans 5,200 kilometers east to west along the equator. It uniquely connects the tropical Indian and Pacific Oceans. It's important to note that it is the largest economy in Southeast Asia. It is the 15th largest economy in the world, with a gross domestic product of around 145 billion US dollars, with strong economic growth forecasts. So this sets the scene in part for our discussions. Indonesia is also a special country from a natural perspective. It's a mega biodiverse country. There are not that many mega biodiverse countries in the world, but it's classified as one of these. It is also located in the center of the Coral Triangle, which is, as we all know, the bullseye of marine biodiversity and a global marine conservation priority. As a result, Indonesia has intense pressures on marine resources and marine assets, including marine mammals. So in this seminar, we're going to discuss several of these major threats to assist with the protective management of this important species group, as we've heard. the many initiatives that are ongoing. So getting into it then, let's start first with looking at some of the species and some of the habitats. Indonesia has very diverse habitats. It's an exceptional habitat diversity, ranging from inland rivers, that's right, riverine species, to coastal mangroves and reefs, right along oceanic islands, migration corridors, canyons, and seamounts. Totally, we have 35 marine mammal species. There's an exceptional cetacean diversity to date. 34 whale and dolphin species have been positively identified. In the coming years, we may add to this number. This includes both residential and migratory species. Interesting to note, Indonesian waters are also strongholds for several species and subspecies that are relatively new to science. And with this, I can include the pygmy blue whale, Omarais whale, and the Australian humpback dolphin. The dugong runs up to 35 species. It is the only species of sea cow, the Serenidae, in Indonesia. It is a seagrass specialist, so keep that in mind for the discussions on threats, the coastal seagrass specialist, but they do roam far and wide. Dugongs are listed as vulnerable on the IUCN Red List. As a broad conservation status summary, all marine mammals are fully protected under Indonesian national law. Several are IUCN Red listed as vulnerable or endangered. Many species and many populations are considered data deficient. And that hampers their management, the data deficiency. The extreme habitat diversity and proximity in the Indonesian seas is really important for our discussions on threats. Now, these habitats are often located in very close proximity to each other. So often there is a really extreme gradient between riverine and coastal habitats right along to oceanic and deep sea habitat. Often you can go 10 kilometers from the beach and find yourself in 4,000 or 5,000 meters deep and close to a seamount. Those coastal and oceanic ecosystems are very closely linked, especially so in the eastern provinces. This means, from a threat perspective, that coastal activities may impact on oceanic species and vice versa. Oceanic activities may impact on coastal species. Cetacean habitats remain underrepresented within marine protected areas in Indonesia and worldwide. However, as we've heard already, in Indonesia, several large-scale marine protected areas have been established in the last 10 years that have a strong cetacean component. New management efforts are starting to address the gap from both global and local initiatives. And I've listed a few of these, ranging from provincial marine spatial planning initiatives to the global IUCN initiative on important marine mammal areas, in which Indonesia is well represented. On to threats. Now, because of their ecology as aquatic mammals, marine mammals are particularly invulnerable to both chronic long-term and acute short-term threats. They are really long-lived, between 20 to over 120 years old. These animals can live to grand old age. They have, however, a very slow reproduction, and that limits their capacity to bounce back. Cetaceans are also some of the largest animals on the planet. Their sheer size makes them vulnerable in the sense that, together, combined with their surface behaviors, it makes them vulnerable to ship strikes, net entanglements, possibly bycatch, for example. Importantly, sound is another crucial feature, and we'll hear more about that with the talk about ocean noise, no doubt. Marine mammals have a complex use of underwater acoustics by both producing sounds, but they are also good listeners. Finally, their ecological role as apex predators on the top are susceptible to a variety of threats as well. So, some of the threats that we're going to discuss today include oil entanglement, ocean noise, plastic debris, discarded fishing gear, and marine mammal bycatch in coastal and pelagic fisheries. That is already a lot to discuss, but there are more. Ship strikes, prey depletion due to overexploitation of fishery stocks, whaling, chemical pollutants, coastal habitat destruction, and last but not least, global warming. This rounds up to quite a list. A quick note on global warming, although we won't be spending much time on that today. It is important to note that the impacts of climate change on our oceans are of major concern, and these include ocean acidification, rising sea surface temperatures, changes in current patterns which will influence the Indonesian flow-through, and monsoonal patterns. All these changes will affect marine mammals and their prey. In recent years, luckily, and hopefully this will gain strength, have increased to reduce our carbon output. And we are on a path towards a net zero carbon emissions by 2050. Indonesia, as a major emitter worldwide, is part of that path. Ocean noise is one of two threats that we've highlighted in particular, and with good reason. Ocean noise is one of the most pervasive threats in our ocean. It causes acoustic habitat degradation, and it has major impacts on all marine mammal species. The reason for that is that for marine mammals, sound is so integral to all social and foraging activities, from echolocation to find prey, to vocalizations, to socialize with each other within the group, to mating calls, as well as passively listening to their environment. All of that has to do with underwater acoustics and underwater sound. It is a critical tool for the survival of all marine mammals. Now, this threat can be summed up perhaps as a deaf whale is a dead whale. Some of those really big ocean noise generators include, from the industry perspective, shipping, seismic surveys, oil and gas activities that are offshore, naval exercises, and from a more local perspective, reef bombing is also part of that suite of ocean noise generators. And again, we have a detailed presentation on this by my colleague, Rob Macaulay. Onwards to the second noise generator, it's shipping. As you can see, Indonesian waters are increasingly busy. Here, the annual vessel traffic density. Indonesia has a rapidly expanding fleet of domestic vessels. In addition to that, Indonesia also has a network of dedicated international sea lanes that crisscross throughout the archipelago. I've highlighted in the big blue box 2 sea lanes in the Sabu Sea region that cross each other perpendicularly, right at the tip end of Alor. So that also increases the risk for collision at sea or grounding. In the years to come, these risks are unfortunately very real. The sea lanes overlap with blue and spermal migration corridors, again, increasing the threat of ship strikes. Local waters are also busy. Again, this is the annual inter-island traffic density around Ambon Harbor in the Banda Sea. So these are otherwise quite remote islands, but shipping is prevalent. The insert photo shows a vessel and a pod of pilot whales off Manipa Island. The second major ocean noise generator are seismic surveys. Seismic surveys use towed arrays of air guns and produce some of the loudest noises that mankind has ever produced. These sounds are used to scan the sea floor down deep for oil and gas exploration. This results in acute and intense impacts at surface as well as at depth. It has a high potential to impact deep diving cetaceans and a variety of other marine life. From a management perspective, the regulation in Indonesia is not yet aligned with stricter rules in other countries. Best industrial practices are urgently needed worldwide, but a special case can be made for Indonesia because of its mega biodiverse waters. The second threat that we have focused on, especially for this seminar, is marine debris. Indonesia is in the top 3 countries for output of marine debris. The top 5, which are located all in Asia, account for about 70% of global marine debris output. Marine debris, plastic trash, it has a widespread and potentially devastating impact, ranging from ingestion, accidental ingestion, or perhaps mistaken identity by targeting prey, false prey that is, to chronic, when plastic deteriorates, breaks down, and gets taken up into the food chain, and eventually bioaccumulates into apex predators like marine mammals. So this threat can be summed up perhaps as the silent killers, because it's so insidious. On a positive note, Indonesia has recognized this threat relatively early on, as we also heard today. In 2017, Indonesia declared quite boldly that by 2025, its aim was to reduce 70% of its plastic debris from 2017 levels, and has committed a large budget for this task. In 2020, there is an action plan and a partnership, but perhaps most importantly, there are ongoing and sustained efforts to solve this urgent threat by many stakeholders throughout the country, from government to local communities to industry roundtables, with the aim to reduce waste, and especially single-use plastics, and to fast-track Indonesia's circular economy. It's important to realize, though, that these threats are not acting alone. They can interact, they can amplify, and result in cumulative impacts. I'll give you a quick example of one of these cumulative impacts from the field. Now, obviously, the rapid emergence of plastics in the last decade has been a major threat. Now, this is not only a coastal problem. In Indonesia, even oceanic species like sperm whales and beaked whales have been found stranded with shocking amounts of plastic items in their stomach. Our surveys have also recorded plastic trash fields throughout East Indonesia especially. In fact, we found that plastic trash is not distributed randomly, and that leads to my point. It tends to accumulate in current lines and oceanic fronts, and these are exactly the preferred habitats for oceanic whales and other marine life such as turtles, whale sharks, mantas. So the impact of marine debris can actually be amplified by concentrating in oceanographic features that boosts its negative impact. These areas of increased productivity, these oceanic fronts, for example, are also important to fisheries, increasing local ocean noise by fishing vessels and the risk of entanglements and bycatch, for example. So here you can see that layering of threats. And finally, I would like to say that although the threats to marine mammals in Indonesia are manifold, it's only by working together and redoubling our efforts that we can reduce these impacts, these cumulative impacts, and safeguard the future of this really important and fascinating species group, and ensure the healthy oceans that we all depend on to survive and thrive. So, as my final slide, I have here a saying by Santoro, a Japanese poet, that puts it very well. Individually, we are one drop, but together, we are an ocean. And I hope we can all be an ocean of change, change for good. Thank you very much for your attention. And I look forward to further discussions and the questions and the presentations of my distinguished colleagues. Thank you. Oh. No, it's by Mr. Santoro, but you're more than welcome to.
Thank you very much, Pak Ben. And I hope you stay with us because I'm sure there will be several questions, if not lots, coming for you later on. After the second presentation finished, we will have the session 1 question answer session.
Yes, I'll be looking forward to that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Pak Ben. And okay, ladies and gentlemen, we will be starting the second presentation. But before we start, of course, I will again mention another fun fact. Similar with land mammals, all marine mammals have hair and mammary gland. So this is another very interesting fact. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, let's move to our second presentation. We will have Ibu Kathy George, Dr. Kathy George. Let me say hi to Ibu Kathy because we're very surprised and happy that Ibu Kathy actually joining us live. So she will be presenting live as well. Meanwhile, before she had some other important activity, but she could spare her time. So we really appreciate it. Before I say hello to Ibu Kathy, let me read her bio. Dr. Kathy George, who will be presenting whale entanglement, is the Director of Field Operation Marine Mammal Center USA. Kathy George is the Global Response Project Manager for the Marine Mammal Center located in Sausalito, California. She has over 15 years of experience with marine mammals entanglements, specializing in entangled whale response. She has participated in 6 whale disentanglements, numerous entangled whale responses, and over 50 sea lion disentanglements. She also leads advocacy efforts to reduce risk of whale entanglement and train many volunteers on how to entangle a whale. Wow, a lot of entangle words. Previously, Kathy co-founded California Whale Rescue, a non-profit dedicated to entangled whale response and prevention. The organization supported NOAA fisheries efforts to standardize response practices, care, training, and communication. Kathy is leading a project with the working group to deploy solar loggers on commercial fishing and whale watching boats to inform relative risk of entanglement. Okay, let's say hi to Ibu Kathy. Can we connect to Ibu Kathy?
Hello.
Hi, Ibu Kathy, how are you?
I am wonderful. Thank you so much for the opportunity to talk to all of you today. I'm very honored for this. Thank you.
We are actually the one who should say thank you very much, especially we know that you are in the States and apparently this is what, about almost 10 o'clock, if not 11 o'clock in the night, Ibu?
It's closer to 8 o'clock, but it's a little bit later than normal. So I'm good, and thank you again. I had an opportunity to spend time in Indonesia previously, and it's a beautiful country with beautiful people, and really excited to share my passion and knowledge with everyone.
Thank you, Ibu Kathy. We would like to give the time. It's all yours.
Thank you. I have used PowerPoint before. Let me try this again.
Okay, we can see your presentation, Ibu, yeah? It's full screen
Great.
now, so you're
Okay.
good to go.
Thank you. So I'm going to talk to you today about whale entanglement and about the Entanglement Response Network, as well as mitigation efforts and prevention efforts that we are undertaking in order to reduce the risk of whale entanglement. As you mentioned previously in the introduction, I work at the Marine Mammal Center. We are on the west coast of the United States on the Pacific Ocean. We are the largest marine mammal hospital in the world, and we've rescued over 24,000 marine mammals along our coastline, which is Northern California and Central California, as well as the Big Island of Hawaii. My team that I manage is specifically focused on field research, so we want to understand what species are visiting our local waters. We respond to all marine mammals, sea otters, sea lions, elephant seals, harbor seals, small cetaceans, and then we do the remote work with the large whales out in the water. And we use the information that we gain during the research as well as the response to inform mitigation and prevention efforts. The photos that you see along the bottom on the far left, this is a team doing a beach rescue of a California sea lion. In the middle photo is our team conducting entanglement response. And you'll see that we're all in boats. So we always stay in boats when we do our disentanglement work. And the photo on the right is a photo of the hospital itself in Sausalito, which is just over the Golden Gate Bridge from San Francisco, California. So I want to talk about whale entanglement. This is a global issue. Statistics show that over 300,000 whales, dolphins, and porpoises get caught or entangled each year. And the whales are free swimming. They do not know borders. So as they migrate between boundaries, they may pick up gear in one location and carry it to another location. The photo that you see here, this is a humpback whale off of California. It is entangled, and there is a disentanglement team in a boat with some buoys behind the whale. So with whale entanglement response, it's illegal to get in the water. We always want to stay in the boats, and we use additional flotation like these buoys to keep the whale at the surface and slow it down. And we use that line that's coming off the whale in this case to allow ourselves to get closer to the whale. So record keeping for entangled whales began in 1982 in the United States. The map you see on the right, this is California, Oregon, and Washington on the West Coast. You're looking at the eastern edge of the Pacific Ocean. South of us is Baja, Mexico. North of us is Canada. The whales in our area come to our area during the summer for feeding. So they're here from the springtime through the winter months, and they're here to eat as much food as they can. They go down to warmer waters down in Baja to breed, mate, and give birth. The entanglement reports, you can see this graph is showing entanglements from 2000 through 2020. You can see a big spike around 2015, 2016. That's when the number of entanglement reports went up. This also coincided with a large heat wave off of our coast. The waters warmed, the upwelling that is usually strong along our coast was not as strong. The small bait fish were more predominant in the area. And we had a lot of whales that were in areas where fishing was happening. Fishing seasons had been delayed because of domoic acid toxicity, which is a neurotoxin that the crabs can get, and delayed the fishing season. So we had a fishing season opening at the same time the whales were returning from their migratory routes. Usually the fishing season opens earlier when there aren't as many whales in the area. So this kind of information was discovered as we were collecting data. And this is going to be a common thing you're going to hear from me. Documentation is so important. So the fishermen themselves recognized that this was an issue. and they don't want to be entangling whales. So a working group was formulated with the state of California. They manage the fishery with our federal government, our National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, with several other nonprofits and the Coast Guard and other regulatory agencies. And we got together and started talking about what can we do to identify areas of high risk for whales. And we found 4 different areas that we could monitor. We could look at fishing dynamics when the fishing season is opening. We could look at forage. So where are the whales feeding? And is there krill, which will keep the humpback whales offshore? Or are they going to be feeding on fish, which would mean they're inshore? We look at the number of whales that are out there. And we look at the number of entanglements that have been reported. So kind of as we monitor those 4 different factors every few weeks during the fishing season and before the start of the fishing season, management actions can be made that would reduce that risk of entanglement. And I think that's the decline that you're seeing after 2018 is when some of those changes started to happen. And we worked with fishermen to put best practices in place. So kind of that's the reason for the spike in this graph. And then also the reason for the start to decline, because a lot of the entanglements, the blue colors that we see are humpback whales. The green color that you see on here are gray whales. And then the red color is unidentified. We have started to see some blue whales get entangled as well. And I know you have blue whales that migrate through your waters as well. The response work that we do, we're part of a national entanglement response network. It's managed by our federal government. That's the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. And we use the same techniques that a global response network uses. So the International Whaling Commission, they have a global network and they're focused more on training international audiences. But the teams themselves use the same tools, they use the same techniques. We can support each other with entanglement responses. As I mentioned, the whales know no boundaries and do travel through different areas. The teams themselves, we go through lots of training. It's really important when you're out there that you have a team that you can trust, that you work with, you have good communication, and you know what to do, because these are stressful situations that are incredibly dangerous. And the number one priority is human safety, and that will never change. In the photo on the left, myself and some team members are practicing. We put a bucket with a bunch of line on it and drug it behind another boat. And I'm holding a pole that has a small GoPro camera at the end to practice getting video of the entanglement and what's happening under the water. Because what's happening above the water is often very different than what is going on underneath the water. And we have our engine up in the boat, so that way we don't become part of the entanglement itself. So we always want to stay in the boat for our safety's sake. The photo on the right-hand side shows some of the tools that we use for our disentanglement efforts. The yellow buoy on the left-hand side, that is a telemetry buoy, and we're able to put a satellite tag in there. So that way we can relocate the whale if we have to stop the disentanglement for some reason. If the weather turns or the whale swims too far offshore that we can't get back to shore at a safe time, we can put this telemetry buoy on the whale and it will help us relocate the whale another day or even later in that day. The orange case on the right contains our tools. We have specialized knives that are rounded and kind of blunt at the end and really sharp on the inside. So that way, if you accidentally touch the whale with the knife, you're not going to cause additional damage. We have special grapples that will grab onto a line or a net on the whale that will catch and essentially become part of that entanglement, but allow us to add extra line so we could work closer to the whale. And I will walk you through a response in my next slide. Oh, that is okay. Let me. Okay. Oh, my apologies. Thank you for letting me know. And oops. So here is a entangled. This is a humpback whale. This is Monterey. The photo, it was taken in Monterey Bay, California. And you can see the humpback whale with the dorsal fin. And that photo was taken for documentation. Dorsal fins can sometimes help with the identification of an individual whale. The center photo below that one is the humpback whale, and a couple hundred yards behind the whale, there are two buoys. And the naturalist on the whale watching boat had noticed this particular whale swimming and seeing the buoys consistently move behind the whale. So they reported the entanglement. We have a national number that anybody could call, or they can call the Coast Guard, and they reported the entanglement in, and trained responders were able to come out there. The naturalist also got photos of the buoys that were behind the whale, so we could use that information to help us understand, was this fishing gear from an active fishing effort? Was it derelict gear? What fishery was it? All information that we can use for prevention efforts in the future. I mentioned we use GoPro cameras on a stick. The photo on the top right shows the peduncle or tailstock area of the whale, and there's 3 wraps of green line going around that area that's starting to embed in the skin. And this is unfortunately what the color of our water looks like here during summer. I wish we had the same beautiful blues that you have in Indonesia, but we do the best with what we can. And the bottom right photo is that same whale 18 days later, and it had swam from Monterey over 210 nautical miles south to Santa Barbara, where we were able to fully disentangle it. There is some whale lice on the whale, and you can see a tiny bit of blood in there, which is okay because it means there's still blood going to the tail, which is really important. And this whale did survive this injury. We were able to fully disentangle it. But this is some of the reasons that documentation is so important. We can understand what happens to the injury over time. And on my next documentation slide, I mentioned this is part of a national and global response network. We have standardized forms that we utilize to collect information. So we can run reports, we can do data analysis, we can use this information for prevention efforts, but we have forms for the response itself, and then we have a form for documentation and what kind of photos we need. And there are a lot of people that are actually involved in an entanglement response. You oftentimes see the few people that are on the boat doing the actual cutting, but safety is number one. We always have a safety crew out there with us. We have someone taking photos, someone doing videos, someone doing documentation, someone communicating with the shore to make sure everyone is aware of what's going on. So this really is a team effort. And the documentation is also important in the case when the whale doesn't survive. The photo on the bottom right with the bunch of buoys on them. And I should add that a lot of the entanglements that we see in the West Coast are trap gear. So it's pots that sit on the bottom, vertical lines to the surface with buoys that mark that pot. And this entanglement, wonderful. This photo on the left is 2 boats. This is that same whale I showed you a photo of earlier. You can see the carbon fiber pole here with the knife at the end that's curved. And this is what it looks like from the surface. So there was that tight tail wrap. He is going to lean in and use that knife and pull, and he made the cut. And that's how simple the cut itself was. And there was a lot of work that was involved getting to that point. This effort was 18 days long. I'm going to show you a video now of what that same, shortly after that cut was made, what it looks like under the water. I will warn you that there is a little bit of blood in this video, but like I mentioned, it's a good sign on the whale, and the whale did survive. So this is after that cut, those lines had separated, and now the entanglement is starting to open, and you're going to watch the line on the right-hand side of the fluke blade is going to break and come off. And shortly after this video ends, the other side came off with the weight of the boat dragging on that line. The team was able to monitor the whale, and they confirmed that it was gear-free and successfully disentangled. So using that documentation that we had collected, we want to look at the sources of entanglement. What is causing all of the entanglements that we are observing? And you can see by this pie chart on the left-hand side, the majority of time, we don't know what the source of the entanglement is. And that doesn't help us when we're trying to reduce that risk. The next biggest pie piece in our case was commercial Dungeness fishery. And so we worked with the fishermen to identify best practices to start monitoring different conditions that would increase the risk. And then regulations were put in place with the fishery that if certain conditions were met, management action needed to happen. But before management action occurred, there was input from the working group and from the fishermen themselves. But we see net entanglements more rarely than we see the trap and pot entanglements here. And all of this information is used for prevention and mitigation. This is our California Department of Fish and Wildlife, our state website for the Dungeness crab fishery. And on this website, information is shared every 2 weeks about the data that is available to inform any management action on the fishery. And the map on the right-hand side, this is the San Francisco Bay Area. This is San Francisco here. And these are track lines where we're going out and doing surveys for whales and documenting where the whales are, what they're feeding on, how many are there, and sharing that information with the state fishery in order to inform their management action. And this data was taken in October of this past year. We're working with Cascadia Research Collective and SR3, to West Coast organizations, to conduct these surveys and analyze the data and share this data. And with this information that was made available, the state actually delayed the opening of the Dungeness crab fishery because so many whales were still in the area. And this information was also utilized by our National Marine Sanctuary System. They had a voluntary speed reduction voluntary vessel speed reduction in place, and it was about to end, and they saw how many whales were still in the area, and they utilized that information to extend voluntary speed reductions in order to reduce the ship strike. So really excited about what this data could do. And while we're out there doing the surveys, we have all the equipment on board that we could disentangle a whale if it is found. And with that, I want to say thank you very much. As I mentioned, this is a team effort, and I could not be here talking to you without everyone else on the team and network behind me to support this effort. So thank you. Yes.
Okay, so we are moving to the next session, which is the question and answer for session 1. We would like to see whether Pak Ben is here. Pak Ben, are you here? Okay.
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, yes. So Pak Ben and Ibu Kathy, Right now, I'm opening the Q&A, and we have 36 questions. This is like, it will take days if you would like to answer this. So I will choose some of the questions for Pak Ben and Ibu Kathy. But before it, I would like to ask, if some of the question cannot be answered, how could they best contact you? Do you have any personal email, or maybe like the email of your organization to be put for the participants? Maybe from Pak Ben first?
Yes, that is fine. My email was actually at the corner of my opening slide of the presentation, but I'm more than happy to provide it later on, and will do my best to get to the questions that we cannot deal with during the limited time here.
Okay, and Ibu Kathy?
Yeah, I'm happy to share mine as well. It was on the presentation, but I could put it in the chat for distribution.
Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, there you have it. In case out of the 36 or what now, 40, 50 questions that you already given, we can't read it, then don't worry, you can reach Pak Ben and Ibu Kathy after or even during the seminar. Okay, let's go to the first question. The first question for Pak Benjamin Khan. This is from Putu Mustika from James Cook University. Hi, Pak Ben, thanks a lot. It's Icha here. Just want to add a thread. For example, citation tourism, because especially after COVID-19, there will be a lot of demands both from operators and tourists to jack up the visitation, hence interaction rates. So I think this is not really a question, but more to what do you think related to her statement. Can you hear me okay?
Hello?
Yeah.
Yes. Thanks, Icha, for your question. I did hear the start of your question, not the statement, but I do realize this is about adding tourism as a concern, as a threat. And I fully agree, especially in the case of what I call over-tourism, where in certain locations there's a high volume of operators, possibly without regulation, without limits on participation, and that can snowball out of control quite easily when whale watching becomes whale harassment.
Okay, thank you, Pak Ben. I think it's very straightforward. Now we move to Ibu Kathy. There is a question from PH Pablo de los Reyes Jr. Hi, Miss Kathy George. Quite interesting about marine mammal telemetry. I'm sorry if I pronounce it wrong. Do you have documentation on the migratory track or route of the marine mammals, particularly a map?
Yes, I don't have the map specifically myself, but I work with partners that create the maps. There was a project called Splash that documented all of the humpbacks in the North Pacific. If you're looking for whales that are migrating more in the Indonesian waters, I'm sure there are local researchers that could provide that information. I know some of the researchers that I work with put tags on whales so we can follow their tracks and what they're doing. Some of the tags, the data can be short-lived for hours, or it could be longer for days or months. But that information does exist and is captured, and I primarily have it on humpback whales. But if there are specific whales that you're interested in, let me know, and I could point you to those sources.
Thank you very much. So as you can see, ladies and gentlemen, Pak Ben and Ibu Kathy responding like straightforward, so we can actually read several questions. Now back to Pak Ben. This is a question, wow, from internal of MMAF, from Professor Ngurah. Hi, Mr. Ben. Please describe more about the status of marine mammals in Indonesia related to global climate change impact. Thank you for your response.
Right. Well, that is a seminar topic on its own. So I will try to keep it relatively short. It is a very much of concern because the impacts of our climate crisis, if I can call it that, are going to be really widespread, and some of them are modeled and can be predicted. Others are not as easily to forecast. And especially in an area in Indonesia where you have such a dynamic oceanography, which relates to all things marine, with the Indian Ocean and the Pacific interchange and the Indonesian flow through on top of that. These are major global forces that may or may not be impacted by global climate change in our lifetimes. From a tropical perspective, the changes may be relatively small for marine mammals as far as their upper temperature range are concerned. But again, that is highly species specific, and it also relates to their prey distribution, which may well be responding to higher temperatures in the seas. Now, you may not get a distributional shift when you go from cold water then going from temperate, because we are already at the high end. So there's nowhere to go except higher yet. So this is a real limiting factor. If animals reach their high temperature limits, and that is a metabolic ingrained limit, then you might see very major changes. So there's a few different perspectives to this, and I hope my very brief answer will suffice.
Thank you, Pak Ben. Okay, now back to Ibu Kathy, but this question can later on after Ibu Kathy, I would like to ask the opinion of Pak Ben as well, because this is like almost similar, and it's a very basic yet a very interesting question. Ibu Kathy, one reason why people catching whales in Indonesia especially is for economic reason. To reduce whales catching effort is to educate people from beginning. This is from Mr. Karnan or Mrs. Karnan. How do you educate people, especially young people or students, to protect marine mammals? And then I would like to continue because there is like special this question is also almost similar. I will try to find it, but maybe Ibu Kathy, you can answer first.
Yeah, I think one of the things that people can do is really be able to experience the whales and learn about them and educate themselves. And I think that can go a long way. I know you were sharing some interesting facts before I came on. I think that's an important way to engage and reach out. There's also a lot of economic value with whales and being able to see whales. So I think if the local community is able to do something safely along those lines in order to bring some money into the community, because a live whale is worth more than a dead whale. And I think one of the things that's really interesting is whales are important for even our health. They're sentinel species. Like whales can store carbon in their bodies, and also the whale poop can help fertilize the ocean and start the food chain growing from the smallest level, which then attracts the larger and larger species. So there's a lot of really exciting things about whales, and I think trying to find ways to connect those to the young people and have them learn and educate them. And if there is any way to allow opportunities for responsible tourism.
Pak Ben as well, and please Ibu Kathy if you want to add, because this is almost similar to the previous question. If someone is not aware of this problem and now wants to do something to help, what can the government or the WWF or Planet Deep recommend that the public can help to tackle this marine life problem? Are there any suggestion maybe from Pak Ben or Ibu Kathy? I think Ibu Kathy already answered.
You want to go ahead, Ben, on this one?
Oh, yes, please, Ibu.
Yep. If you want to go ahead first, please.
Thank you. Yeah. Okay, I will. Yeah, if there are entanglements and people are interested in getting involved, I think at minimum, the most important thing you could do is get documentation about it. And locally, like I mentioned, the national network that I'm a part of is part of a global network, and reach out to the IWC and get some training scheduled in your area. And WWF could work with you and perhaps help support some of the costs for training, costs for the tools. The network members themselves are more than happy to train and educate people. So I think reaching out to another member of the network, because it is important that we do this safely for people, because we don't want anyone getting injured or worse, killed doing this activity. So reach out to existing responders and reach out to the IWC. Let me know if you're interested in training coming to your area, and I can help with connections.
Thank you, Ibu. That is very informative. So I hope the participants can understand the answer, and we will hear from Pak Ben as well. Please, Pak Ben.
I fully agree and concur with that. I think this is the entanglement is a very specialized skill. It would be really helpful to have more training, and Planet Deep will do its best to assist with that. You may recall in 2014, we had not necessarily an entanglement, but we had blue whales trapped in a reef lagoon in Lembata, where many stakeholders try to get these animals free again into the open sea, and there were some decisions that and some planning that was needed, and it gets really, really complex because you're dealing in a remote situation with very large animals that are not relaxed by definition. They are stressed. They may lash out, they may dive, they may do a lot of unpredictable behaviors. And if you're in the wrong place at the wrong time, you can have serious injury or death even. So safety is number one. Hence these skills that need to be brought to the fore. And I think we can reach out and to Kathy and others in this field, and hopefully build up our own capacity and expertise.
Thank you very much, Pak Ben and Ibu Kathy. And just like the two speakers already mentioned, if we want to start, if we really want to contribute, go to any organization or the links or the nearest ministerial or department that you can reach. You can go to kkp.go.id/dgprl and then wwf.id, planetdeep.org, or any other links that will be or already in the presentation. So this is not a promotion, but this is an information. Thank you very much. We also have the last question, one each for Pak Ben and Ibu Kathy, because we have so many, but yet we have another 3 speakers waiting for their turn. So for Pak Ben, this is from Sekar Mira from Indonesian Institute of Science. Hi, Pak Ben. From your previous study for many years on sperm whales of Indonesia, how many is their population in Indonesia and their biological removal rate? And then do you have any technical recommendation to avoid ocean noise in our regulation?
Thank you for your very interesting questions. The quick answer is no, and then for the regulations I will follow up. So here goes. For sperm whales, the sperm whales were the most abundant whale prior to industrial whaling, around 3 million or so sperm whales. They have also been the heaviest hunted, so there's about 1 million sperm whales left, and this is globally. The Indonesian component to all of that is largely unknown. With that, you also have to take into account that there will be an Indian Ocean population, Northeast Indian Ocean population, as well as possibly a Pacific population, and the males roam far and wide and even cross hemispheres. So this is quite a complex species to get a regional or even a sub-regional, let alone national grip on. So it's really quite hard. However, genetics may give us some insights into this. For ocean noise, I will leave the specifics to our distinguished speaker, Professor Rob Macaulay, to fill in on that. But what I do want to say is from a management perspective, I think there's an opportunity in Indonesia. A lot of the seismic survey operators, for example, that work in the region, Australia, Malaysia, otherwise, have very strict controls, operational controls, and environmental standards. So these are the same companies and often the same vessels and the same crews that are fully trained and fully aware of what needs to be done for certain country regulations and laws. So hence my comment in my presentation that to align Indonesia's regulations with what's going on in the rest of the region and some best practices globally will make a big difference in the impact that seismic surveys can have on Indonesia's marine mammals. And so that is a policy development, but I think this is something that is urgently needed for the mega biodiverse waters of Indonesia.
And that's the last question for you, and also now the last question for Ibu Kathy. There are actually some similar questions, so from several participants. What are the actual preventions undertaken so that these whales do not get entangled in the first place? It's from Daniel Crabb. Is the fisheries management taking up the recommendations brought forward by the Marine Mammal Center? And it's also resonate to Professor Ngurah that's asking like, please tell us more about how to avoid the entanglement for the marine mammals. So it's very similar. Please, Ibu Kathy.
Yeah, those are great questions. I think most of the success that we've had has come from pulling in the fishermen as stakeholders in a working group, along with regulatory agencies and other nonprofits focused on ocean conservation. Some of the things that we've done are we've put regulations in place for excessive line use. As I mentioned, we're focused on the trap fisheries, which are more line and pot versus net. So we put regulations in place to allow enforcement to fine fishermen if they put an excess amount of line in the water. We saw those unknown category of unknown entanglements. We've asked other fisheries to start marking their gear so we can know if those entanglements are part of that unknown category, so we know where that source of gear is coming from. We put a best practices guide in place that is written and developed with the fishermen that gets shared to every fisherman in the fishery. And we also are testing line strength and using line strength that has a lower breaking point so the whales could potentially break out of the gear. We're looking at different types of ropeless gear and testing that to see if those are viable solutions for this fishery. We're looking at other lines that have a kind of weak link in them that could break easier. So and the fishermen are the ones that are coming up with a lot of these ideas. So I think the key to our success has been working directly with the fishermen and having them at the table and participating with us. So I've been really pleased with what we're doing so far. We still have more to do and are still being creative and welcome ideas from others as well.
Thank you very much. So ladies and gentlemen, whether those the organizing committee here or also all participants wherever you are, please give a huge applause to Bapak Benjamin Khan, MSc, and Dr. Kathy George. This has been a very, very informative, not only for me, I think, but for, I should update, more than 800 viewers in Zoom and more than 170 participants in YouTube alone. So amazing. Thank you very much. So,
Thank you.
we would like to thank you and have a great day, and maybe for Ibu Kathy, have a good rest because this is already night for you.
Thank
Yeah,
you. Bye-bye.
okay. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, we will be continuing shortly with the session 2. Before we move to session 2, I shall read again quickly the rules. So make sure that you turn off the microphone and camera or your mobile phone if you are around. And then for those of you in Zoom, use the Q&A feature. And for YouTube, use the Slido. And for those who want to hear in Indonesian language, make sure you press the interpretation, the globe button in the Zoom. Meanwhile, you have to wait and follow our event until the last bit of it, because when you fill up the attendance list, then we will be sending you the certificate and also the links of the materials where you can get more information related to the presentations. Okay, before we move, we have fun fact 3. On its evolution, the ancestors of whales lived on land. There you go. I get all of this information from the website or the social media of KKP, DJPRL, the WWF, Planet Deep. Very, very interesting. Okay, we are going to start session 2 now with the first speaker. Maybe we can have the profile bio of Dr. or of Professor Robert Macaulay. Yeah. So, I think Professor Robert Macaulay has been waiting. He will be presenting about ocean noise and marine mammals. Professor Robert Macaulay is from the Center for Marine Science and Technology, Curtin University, or CMST, Perth, Australia. And he has been working in the field of bioacoustics and impacts of sound on marine fauna for 30 years. Amazing. Macaulay has conducted experiments of impacts of petroleum exploration sources on plankton, squid, oysters, lobster, octopus, fishes, marine turtles, and humpback whales, thus has a wide comparative experience of noise impacts in the ocean. Many projects and research has conducted by Professor Macaulay, among others, research on sound made by marine invertebrates, fish, whales, and dolphins, observations and experimentation of the impacts of sound on marine fauna, ran a multi-institution, multidisciplinary program on the use of the Perth Canyon by pygmy blue whales, study of the response of humpback whales to seismic survey signals, studying fish communities and population trends using passive and active acoustics, and using sea noise to monitor fauna near petroleum development. Okay, let me greet Professor Macaulay first. Hello, Mr. Rob Macaulay. Hello, Pak.
Hello,
Pak Rob.
hello, can you hear that?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me as well, Pak Rob?
Yes, I can.
Thank you very much, Pak Rob, for your time. And please be ready. There might be lots of questions coming towards you later on.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah. Okay,
so
Pak Rob, the time is yours.
Okay, thank you. So Ahmed, okay, so the presentation is being presented by someone else. So mine has a big box in the middle. I'll give you a rundown of noise in the ocean, how sound can impact animals, and a little bit on what we can do about it. This is focusing on marine mammals, but you can't forget that marine mammals have to eat. They're completely reliant on a healthy habitat. So there's a little picture of a krill in there. If you change the behaviour or the abundance of the krill, you will change the behaviour and abundance of your whales. Can we have the next slide, please? I can do it, can I? Okay, so I just wanted to reiterate that Indonesia is particularly rich in marine mammals. We have a subspecies of blue whale, which traverses the Western Australian coast. I'm based in Western Australia to the south of this chart here. But it enters the Banda Sea every year. Benjamin knows all about this. And so you have a population of perhaps several thousand blue whales that uses the Banda Sea and passes down through all those channels to the south of that twice a year. In addition to that, you have sperm whales. You'll be starting to see more and more humpbacks as they recover. You have a wide diversity of toothed whales, and there may still be some dugong as well. Okay, so if we can go to the next slide, please. Yeah. You can make it full page. If you go to view, full screen, please. Ahmed, if you go to the view at the top and select the full screen, that will make it full screen. Okay, I'll carry on. One thing I've really got to emphasise is that sound is a key faculty in marine fauna. It's not just marine mammals, everything uses sound in the ocean. And it's pretty easy to understand why. You have on the left at the bottom what all the brochures show: bright waters, lots of fish, brightly coloured fish swimming around. They're brightly coloured because they can take advantage of the fact you can see them. But the reality more than often becomes the top right, where that's in the middle of the day. It's very dim. There is another image that's over to the left, and that was in the middle of the day, and it's even dimmer. And then for 12 hours of the day, the sun is gone, so it's completely black. So marine fauna is well adapted to utilise sound, and that's not just making sound, it's listening for sound. So if we can go to the next slide, please. Okay, so again, I'll just reiterate, vision is severely limited in the ocean. Even at best, you've got a range typically in the tens of metres to perhaps hundreds of metres. I have had friends dive in Antarctic waters and they report back that they can see for a kilometre, but your acoustic signals of fish can communicate over a kilometre. A toothed whale will communicate over perhaps a kilometre with their high-frequency whistles, sometimes up to 5 kilometres. A baleen whale can talk to another baleen whale, a blue whale, for example, in open deep water. It will be able to communicate and make itself clear to another whale that's perhaps 150 kilometres away. And there simply isn't any other sensors available to the animals to do this. And they can actually send information. And one way that fish do that is they just say the same thing over and over again. I will add here, fish make a lot of noise, and I imagine Indonesia is probably quite rich in fish noise. Okay, if we go to the next slide, please. Okay, so some of the information available to animals in the ocean just from listening. This is not making any noise per se, and this is not limited to marine mammals. A lot of fish listen, a lot of invertebrates actually listen. And there's animals that live on the substrate which have got sensory systems that can detect some of these cues. Wind. Wind makes noise in the ocean. It's one of the most predominant sources of what we call ambient noise, natural background noise. As the wind strength increases, it produces tiny little bubbles. Bubbles get pushed into the ocean, they oscillate or they implode. And when they implode, they make a cracking noise, and the combined Noise from several million bubbles imploding increases the ambient noise. So the animal can get some feeling of wind strength just from the amount of noise. Now, if you go to the view up in the top, please. Up the top left, go to view. No, that's me. Now I've lost it. You're right at the top. Okay, well, I'll carry on. There's a lot of distant acoustic cues in the ocean. There's a phenomenon in the deep ocean where sound is ducted in a channel, and we get a lot of long-range acoustic cues. And animals that leave Indonesian waters through the southern island chain will instantly be able to get bearings to places, perhaps as far away as southern Australia and possibly from Antarctica on certain bearings. The presentation's disappeared. Okay, I'm going to have to move along a bit. So a lot of animals deliberately make noise, particularly for reproduction. Fish advertise spawning events, mate attraction, it mediates spawning, same in marine mammals. Group coherence, so you keep your group together. And group coherence, you know, a group of whales or pod of whales, you've got to realise that in the ocean they can communicate over perhaps 100 kilometres in the open ocean. So, and some of the, like a blue whale can swim 100 kilometres in 3 hours. No, that's not it. It should say full page somewhere. Fit page. Okay, we'll just leave it there. Okay, and then another thing with sound in marine mammals is nearly all of the toothed whales, well, all of the toothed whales echolocate to hunt prey. They make tiny little clicks. It's a form of sonar. They'll target the clicks on, say, a squid, for example, for a sperm whale, and then they can localise the response, travel to the squid, and then perhaps stun it with a really loud echolocation click, and then eat it. Okay, so if you can go to the next slide, please. Okay, so the types of noise in the ocean from human sources, there's a wide variety. These are just some of the ones that make a lot of noise. Offshore petroleum facilities, they do make a lot of noise. The noise tends to actually be from the shipping involved, less so from the oil platforms. The ships, especially if they're operating in dynamic position mode where they hold station, the bubbles are in that dynamic position mode. The propellers are very inefficient. They produce a large amount of bubbles, and the bubbles make noise. There's a picture of a propeller there. What happens on the propeller is the pressure drops on one side of the blade, and that causes formation of bubbles. The bubbles then implode, and that makes a lot of noise. And so a propeller that's working will make a lot of noise from cavitation bubbles. A propeller that's dirty will make even more noise from cavitation bubbles because there'll be more bubbles produced. So the predominant sources of noise on ships are the propeller noise, but there's also engine noise which radiates through the hull. In this case, the picture in the middle is a tug. That tug will be making a lot of propeller noise as it manoeuvres. If we go to the top right, pile driving, this is an impulse type noise, bang, bang, bang. And those impulses have special effects, which I'll actually talk a little bit about. Offshore construction, seismic surveys, they rapidly vent high pressure air out of those little ports. There's an air gun at the bottom plot in the middle. You can see the ports on the right. The tube fills up with very high pressure, scuba tank pressure air, and it's just suddenly instantaneously released, comes out those ports and makes a great big bang. And it's akin to a balloon bursting. And you can see on the right a ship towing multiple strings of air guns that possibly got up to 20 to 40 of those individual air guns that all fired simultaneously. And then the final source on the bottom left, explosions, and they're one of the worst sources for actually damaging animals. Okay, so if we can go to the next slide, please. Can we go to the next slide? Yeah. Okay, so with marine mammals, there are in general, two functional groups for hearing. This is not always the case, but the plots that are shown have a logarithmic frequency scale on the bottom, and on the left-hand axis, that's logarithmic, so and it's going up to 1,000,000 hertz on the top, both plots. And on the left, we have a threshold at which an animal starts to hear a signal. And these are curves that people have put a lot of work to derive, and they show what's a typical vertebrate hearing sensitivity curve, which is that heavy red curve. Humans have a curve that looks like that, but you slide it to the left. So the dolphins there in those two curves, those two plots, have best sensitivity between about 10,000 and 100,000 hertz, so 10 to 100 kilohertz. The baleen whales, no one's ever been able to do this for a baleen whale for obvious reasons. They're simply too big to contain, can't train them. But we believe they have best sensitivity in the range 20 to 1,000 hertz. So essentially you would slide that red curve way down to the left, so that the lower part of the curve was sitting over 20 to 1,000 hertz. And this is important because like a seismic air gun, most of its energy is below 500 hertz. So you would say that dolphins at moderate range are not going to be overly impacted. Okay, so if we go to the next slide, please. That's it. So the noise impact types we can have, immediate lethal impacts. And these are produced by mechanical responses in the body. There's two mechanisms. Mechanical responses I'll talk about, and neurological responses, which is more how the animal interprets the sound. But we can get immediate lethal responses from sound, which mostly from explosives. Pile driving can cause lethal effects in fish. And the sorts of effects you get, physical rupture from overexpansion of gas spaces. And then you can get a sudden pressure drop, which releases dissolved gases. Both of these can be violent and can damage a variety of organs. So it's probably limited to explosives. Blast fishing is particularly destructive in a lot of Asian waters, and pile driving. Then you can get sublethal, and by sublethal I mean where there are physiological impacts. You perhaps damaged the ears, you might have damaged some tissue, the kidney or the liver. You do get this sort of damage from intense impulse signals and also from continual noise exposure. You get tissue damage to the hearing systems. You can get compromised immune systems, sensory system damage, and then you can get various forms of hearing damage. And then we move on to what are the neurological effects. So this is how the animal interprets the sound and what it does with the responses. You can get avoidance from some noise sources, and you can actually get attraction to noise sources. And the image on the right there shows a humpback whale swimming towards an air gun, because the air gun sounds like another humpback whale breaching. You get what's called masking, and you get this from all noise sources, where the noise source reduces the communication space of an animal. And then you can get no response where the animal hears the sound but doesn't do anything. And then this is probably one of the ones that's most important for marine mammals, especially with seismic surveys, where the prey are impacted in a negative or positive way, and that impacts the marine mammal. And that's potentially a widespread impact for marine mammals. So if you go to the next slide, please. Could we have the next slide? Yeah. So I'm going to have to skip over some of these. So the time frame of exposure is important. Is it a single shot? There's 10,000 shots over 24 hours. Does the frequency content overlap with the hearing capability? There's a whole lot of things about the character of the noise. Is it impulsive? Is it short and sharp as per a balloon bursting, or is it steady state? It just goes on and on and on. And there's quite a common form of hearing damage in humans where we don't recognise pulses faithfully. Our hearing system responds faithfully, but our brain has an integration time, and so it doesn't judge the loudness of an impulse correctly.
Excuse me, Professor Macaulay. We only have like about 3 minutes. Maybe you can summarize a bit and also mention how to best reach you if there are some questions or people who would like to know more related to this. Thank you, Bapak.
Okay, so if you just skip through, skip through, please. Keep going. The next slide, please. I will just say a little bit about this. When you're considering the scale of impacted noise, you have to consider the scale of the noise impact to get some sense of whether it's an ecologically important one. Okay, next slide, please. The slides will be available, I assume. Keep going. Next slide, please. I think it's the last two. The second last slide is the one I want. Keep going. Keep going, please. Next slide. Can you keep going? There's about another 3 slides. Keep going. Next slide, please. That's it. I will just stop here a little bit. This is response of a whole range of marine fauna to petroleum seismic. On the left, we have what are termed the R-adapted animals, the plankton, small fish. On the right, we have the marine mammals, and then we have a whole host, and all of those animals we have done experiments with, and we tend to see more of the physiological and pathological effects as we go down the animal group, and less to none as we go up the animal group, and we seem to see more behavioural responses as you go towards the humpback end of the scale. And so those animals on the left, they can't get out of the way. The animals on the right can get out of the way, and they can adapt. So they do respond by protecting themselves. And it's the ones on the left you have to worry about. Okay, so if we go to the next slide, please. Can we go to the next slide? Yeah. Okay, management. This is the second last slide. Needs to be on a case-by-case basis. Not every source is the same. Petroleum seismic. They need to consider the ecological scale of the impact as well as the impact directly on marine mammals. They need to involve heavy stakeholder consultation. That's been demonstrated to be highly important in Australia. Timing is critical, as best as possible. Avoid sensitive periods. Avoid sensitive spatial areas. And then there are a lot of countries that put a lot of effort into how to manage seismic surveys in the marine domain, and it would be wise to take the best practice from some of those other countries. Then I'll just go to the last slide, please. And that's the summary slide. Go to the last slide. In summary, marine fauna and marine mammals rely heavily on sound. There are a large number of man-made noise sources in the ocean, and some places, such as ports, can be extremely noisy. And it's in general, it's the high amplitude, short impulse signals such as blast fishing, petroleum seismic, pile driving, which have the potential for widespread physiological trauma or, in some cases, death for blast fishing. The other noise types, they reduce communication space for animals. They can create physiological problems if there's long-term exposure, such as in a port, and they alter behaviour patterns. And again, management really needs to be a case-by-case basis, whether that's a case as a port or a seismic survey operation. I'll stop there because I've gone over time. So thank you for listening.
Thank you very much for Bapak Professor Rob Macaulay, and we hope the information that you've given us can be very useful for all the participants and us. Thank you, Bapak. Have a great day. And I hope you will still be here if later on, by the end of this session, there will be a question and answer session.
Okay, yeah, I'll come back for the question and answer session. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we will shortly move to a very, very, very interesting topic. Before it, I would like to read you one more fun fact. So, do you know that dugong is marine mammal from Sirenian family that can dive up to 6 minutes underwater? 6 minutes. I tried and I could only do like 1 minute, 20 seconds, and that's my maximum. So, amazing. Okay, now we will move to a very interesting topic even for myself. It is whales and plastic. Yeah. It will be presented by Dr. Brita Denis Hardesti, or we call Ibu Denis. Can we see? Yeah, it's already there, the profile bio. She is the Senior Principal Research Scientist for CSIRO, Oceans and Atmosphere. Excuse me. Ibu Denis is a research scientist with CSIRO Oceans and Atmosphere based in Hobart, Tasmania. She has been leading a diverse array of research projects for the past 10 years, with her main research projects focused on the impacts of marine debris and the development of analytical tools for tackling illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing activities. For the last several years, she has been leading a suite of projects aimed at identifying the risk marine debris poses to Australian wildlife and using sound science to inform and underpin policy and design decision-making. A broadly trained ecologist, the main thrust of her research currently focuses on litter, debris, waste, and plastic pollution. She is also focusing on reducing waste at its source and understanding where in the supply chain losses are occurring. She has also been working with fishers, fisheries management, and stakeholder groups to ameliorate the impacts of derelict fishing gear and reduce the amount of gear lost into the environment. So, let me say hello. Hello, Ibu Denis. Let's try. I think it's still trying to reach. Ibu Denis, are you there? I think you are still muted. Yeah, we can see you but cannot hear your sound. Ibu Denis, we cannot hear your sound. Maybe it is still muted or
My microphone is not
Yeah.
showing.
Now
You can hear me now?
we can hear you now. So let me start again. How are you, Ibu?
I'm very well this afternoon. Thank you so much. And I'm hopeful that you are also able to see the first slide.
Yes, the slide is actually already been there clearly, and now we can hear you perfectly. And I'm sure lots of participants will be giving lots of questions. Hence, the topic is very interesting. So I will give you the floor, Ibu Dennis. The time is all yours.
Thank you very much. And I really appreciate the opportunity to be here and to share a bit of information with you about some of the work that we have been doing. I think it may be worth noting that most of the work that I do has been focused internationally rather than domestically here in Australia. And I was asked today, because another speaker is unable to present, to talk about plastic pollution and marine mammals more generally, and also to include entanglement, so abandoned, lost, or derelict fishing gear as well. So I will touch on those two areas, and for me, in a sense, it makes it much easier because our fishing gear is made of plastic, and those topics are so deeply entwined, particularly when we're speaking about marine mammals. So thank you again for the opportunity to share today. I'm going to hopefully have my slides move along. To start with a little bit of framing and foundation, and apologies if much of this information is repetitive for many of you, if it's information that you know about. It, just in terms of framing this topic, around 3/4 or 80% of the waste that ends up in the ocean that's human-made is predominantly plastic. Around 3/4 of that waste that ends up in the ocean also is coming from land. This is quite separate or different, however, than the amount of fishing gear that ends up lost at sea, or debris that ends up falling off of shipping containers or from other sea-based activities. We know, and it's been documented, that over 800 marine species are affected by plastic pollution. We did some work where we estimated that there's around 14 million tons of microplastics alone on the seabed floor, and that is somewhere between 25 and 35 times more plastic than the trillions of plastic pieces that are floating on the ocean surface. From some work that we've done and others have done as well, we have actually estimated, and we have also seen, that as few as one single piece of plastic is enough, depending upon what type it is, and we'll talk about that a little bit more later, and where it gets caught in the animal, is enough to kill a turtle, a seabird, or even a marine mammal. And as a little bit of a comparison or understanding, we estimate in Australia that around 67 million tons of waste are generated by Australians each year, from a recent estimate from about 4 or 5 years ago. So we've been taking a risk-based approach to really understanding and identifying some of the problems. And what that means is we look at where does our waste that ends up in our oceans come from? And that means including how many people live in an area, what are the socioeconomics, how do people move around the landscape, on bicycle, on foot, via car or buses. And then we have been studying how does our waste move through the environment. Is it often littered by people? Does it travel along road networks or rivers, creeks, and streams? And then we have been studying and trying to understand better what are those impacts from our plastic pollution on our wildlife in our coastal and marine environments, on people, on economics, and on our society at large. We've been coupling all of that information with trying to understand how effective different policies or management responses may be in a real effort to look at how policy changes can affect reduction of litter losses or waste being lost to the environment in the first place. And so I'll talk a little bit later, but we've been doing everything from asking people, asking at local levels how much litter is lost, asking fishers how much litter do they lose at sea, how much fishing gear do they lose at sea, and what are the underlying drivers behind how much fishing gear fishers actually lose to the ocean each year. To give a better example or a little more clarity around a risk-based approach and what we mean by that, I think that may be useful to many to understand because it can be quite a useful lens. And so really it means what is the probability or the chance of something happening? And so how much, what is the chance of plastic being eaten or an animal being tangled up in plastic? And for that, we need to understand, first of all, what's the exposure? So is there plastic in the environment in the first place? And then what's the effect on that animal if indeed there is that? There is, and we know that it's growing. We know that plastic in the ocean is increasing proportionate to how much plastic has been produced through space and time. So the risk-based approach needs to understand, is there plastic in the environment in the first place? Is the animal out there in the environment? And then what happens, or does that animal interact with that plastic waste? So does the animal that we focus on, does the animal eat or ingest that plastic, or does the animal get entangled or caught up in that plastic pollution? So some of the work that we have been focusing on over the last few years has really looked at how many different species are affected and where are they. And this first slide here just touches on turtles, the global turtle population, as well as the global seabird populations as well. And what we know, or what we find, is that species around the world are affected. We find the highest risk of impact is in areas where we have high biodiversity, so lots of different species or taxa, similar to what we find in Indonesian waters. We also know that coastal areas are very important because so many of our marine species earn their livings, they spend their lives in and around the continental shelves where we have much higher biodiversity, much greater resources available for food, for nutrition and those sorts of things. And we've seen that around 700 plus species from the taxa that we've looked at have been widely affected by marine debris or plastic pollution. So we wanted to unpack this a little bit in greater detail, and I'll focus here on some of the work that we know, and I promise you I won't just be talking about our research. I'll be touching on lots of different research that's been done around the world. We actually asked experts around the world, what do you think results in the greatest harm to seabirds, to turtles, and to marine mammals? And we asked them for entanglement, ingestion, and then chemical contamination that comes from eating plastic. And we based this upon 30 years of data where we identified the most common items that are littered or found on beaches based upon the international coastal cleanup data. And so many of you on the line have undoubtedly gone out and collected information or cleaned up your local beach, and many of you hopefully will have contributed that to the international coastal cleanup. So we've been analyzing that data, working with Ocean Conservancy, and some of the things that we've really focused on, and I'll talk about here now, are what are the biggest impacts to marine mammals and what specific items are most damaging. And the reason we think that is really relevant is that gives us a real direct line to targeting potential policies if we want to reduce the impact to some of those important marine taxa. So what do we find in terms of what items are most likely to result in harm to marine mammals? So on the x-axis here, across the bottom, it shows the fraction or proportion of the population that is likely to be affected. And then of those that are affected, what proportion do we think are likely to be killed from those particular items? Now, the greatest harm in terms of affecting the most animals and resulting in the highest chance of death, says the global experts, results from eating plastic bags and plastic utensils. Now, the next closest area, which is expected to affect around 40% of those animals that are affected, and then to actually result in death to around 40% of those comes from items such as fishing line, wrappers, bottle caps, cigarette butts, other packaging, takeaway containers, and things like that. And this is not based upon what we think, it's based upon an analysis of what the global experts that replied to surveys, what they believe is most harmful for marine mammals due to ingestion. And now if we look at entanglement, we find a different picture. And not surprisingly, what we find in the box in red here is that it's expected that around 60%, and 60% of those animals or marine mammals that are affected are being entangled or ensnared by fishing buoys, traps and pots, fishing line, and fishing nets. The next closest damaging item for marine mammal entanglement is expected to be plastic bags with an increased amount of harm. And I would say that balloons, which is anticipated to, of the animals that it affects, it's not expected to result in death. And balloons are quite uncommonly found in the marine environment, but for many, many taxa, they result in what we call a disproportionate amount of harm or disproportionate negative consequence. When we looked at the same thing for chemical contamination, to be honest, what we find, and I didn't put all the details on the other, on the side there, what we find is that a far smaller proportion of wildlife is expected to be affected due to chemical contamination due to eating plastic, with very, very low or no mortality resulting from the chemical contamination alone. I think that's not a surprise, given that it's much harder to estimate or to measure chemical contamination effects, and we know far less about that. So if you want to look at some of that in synopsis or summary, what we find is that overall fishing-related items in plastic bags are expected or anticipated to have the biggest impact or negative impact for marine mammals. And while not in exactly the same order, we do find similar results for the other major taxa that we looked at, which are seabirds and the 7 species of marine turtles. When you look at another body of work done by other researchers, if you want to get an estimate or an understanding of how much plastic or how many species are we finding to have ingested plastic for marine mammals, what we find is that certain taxa are sampled, and we find very, very low incidence of having eaten plastic, such as for Antarctic fur seals. You know, for narwhals, by example, it shows 100% of those animals sampled had eaten plastic. However, if you look at the sample size, that information comes from one single individual. And then you also see the proportions vary with other taxa, typically finding plastic having been eaten by those marine mammals in fewer than a third of all cases, with many cases where you have samples of 1,500 or 2,000 or 4,000 animals being far less than 10% of those animals being shown to eat or plastic, or to eat plastic and for it to be observed based upon necropsy information. I think it's worth noting that when we're talking very large animals, it's often easy potentially to miss very, very small objects or items because we're looking through such a large amount of gut material or gastrointestinal material. The size of a stomach of a whale is very different than that of a seabird or a turtle, for example. I think it's also worth noting and reflecting that entanglement is something that is much more visible, and I apologize for the confronting nature of some of these images in here. These are from, some of these are from peer-reviewed publications that you can see the references for on the bottom there. It's far less common for us to come across a marine mammal and to witness it actually eating or, you know, ingesting a piece of plastic or anthropogenic material. Martin Stelfox a few years ago published this paper looking at ghost fishing, and to talk a little bit more about derelict fishing gear, I thought this was a great graphic to show the ghost fishing process, or what can happen. And so ghost fishing is what we call it when fishing nets are abandoned, lost, or discarded at sea. And we say that because those nets can continue to fish indiscriminately for years to decades. And what can happen is those nets will continue to fish. They may capture fish, but marine mammals and sea turtles and birds and other wildlife. And then those organisms may fall out of the nets. Scavengers may come and then, eat or feed upon those organisms, and those nets may continue to fish and continue that cycle for up to decades if they are not removed. And we also know, and was highlighted earlier by Kathy George, that it is very risky, dangerous, and difficult to actually disentangle large marine mammals. It's also optimal if those nets can be recovered before they begin to ghost fish. When we look at some other work, we can actually start to unpack which taxa feed and which parts of the water column and how they tend to interact with our marine debris. And so what we see in the very pale bars for the pie chart are that deep diving foragers on the left of the screen tend to become entangled far less than they do if they are feeding in more shallow areas. So what we find is that we have that surface animals may be more likely to become entangled, whereas animals that feed lower in the water column may be more likely to become to ingest or to eat plastic pollution instead. And on the bottom, it just shows some of the size and scope and scale of plastic pollution that has come out of the stomach from a single whale in this instance. If we look from this other research that was evaluating necropsies to look at plastic ingestion by cetaceans and other marine mammals, we find that plastic bags, plastic packaging, fishing gear, metal, which is perhaps, although it does not say, it may be associated with fishing gear, such as hooks or, or fittings to the ends of lines, as well as plastic sheeting and rubber, comprise most of what is found in the digestive tract of those animals that are studied. So again, it's plastic-related single-use items, such as plastic bags, and fishing-related gear that seem to be in highest abundance. This is from a different body of work. We also then have seen some work to look at how do we want to identify what different marine fauna are being affected by plastic pollution and where that is. And while this study did not focus solely on marine mammals, we do look at cetaceans and pinnipeds, as well as turtles and seabirds. And this map here shows a representation of where the studies to date have been conducted, because this was a review or an analysis of the other publications in the field. And so it gives you a little bit of information about where we have those particular taxa. And again, you can access any of these. Any of the papers that are mentioned here are available online.
Ibu Denise, we have remaining 4 minutes. Thank you.
No problem. Thank you. And this is for both presentations, because I'm doing a joint presentation with both. Hello? Okay, I'll just keep going. Then, this next figure here shows a bit of information about the proportion of mortality by different animals. And I guess I would ask you to look at the cetaceans and pinnipeds, which are in red and green, because those are the taxa of interest, and it shows what debris items, such as plastic, thin-like plastic, and fishing debris, are most likely to affect the groups or taxa of interest. I won't spend more time here in the interest. When we looked at this more specifically for cetaceans, and when we can say whether or not the item is actually present in the animal, or if the item actually resulted or caused the death of the animal, we find that hard plastic fragments and thin-like film, it sometimes causes death and in greater abundance than do other items, although we also find ropes and fishing-related debris to be prevalent for cetaceans. For pinnipeds, what we find is that fishing debris tend to be the main items that cause death, although again, note here that the sample sizes are fairly small. When you turn to another study to look at different pinnipeds, cetaceans, and dugong, as was mentioned earlier, we see from this study the percentage of lost fishing gear that results in ensnarement or being captured by various marine taxa, and whether that's rope or lines or monofilament line or rope attached to pots and traps here. I think it's also worth noting that studies from around the world focus in particular areas, and those result in some biases of our understanding. We've seen far more studies published in recent years within the Indian and other regions of the world. And I just want to highlight briefly a really neat paper and neat approach that I have seen, which I think may be really relevant for people here or of interest as we see an increased focus on marine debris impacts on wildlife. Another group reached out and engaged with people through Facebook to get a representation of different wildlife in different countries to see how much impact how many species and what numbers of taxa are being affected by marine debris. And this is just a map showing the different areas of it. And the photos show an opportunity to engage in waste audits and present some of the data and information that the public has shared, which starts to give us a clue in terms of popularity of particular areas and where and what types of wildlife may be affected by marine debris. And when you looked at this, at the public, where we have lots of activity in social media across the different types of stranding events, and then they were able to use veterinary information or more detailed information to say how many had necropsies performed and how many of those necropsies or those autopsies did we find litter in those animals across these different countries. And I think it's a great opportunity to engage with the public to increase the awareness and for the public to help direct experts for where they may need to put efforts towards helping to reduce litter at its source. I bet if I was able to ask you all and talk with you all directly and could say how much fishing gear is lost each year, many of you would have heard the number that there's 640,000 tons of plastic pollution or of fishing gear lost to the world each year. However, that number is not correct, and the authors of the original paper or report don't even state that number. So if you're interested to understand a little bit more about that, we've been trying to ask questions about how much fishing gear is lost each year. And the studies that have been done to date, doing an analysis of all those studies, we were able to estimate the proportion of lines for the major different fisheries types around the world that are lost to the ocean each year. And this work can be found, if you like, in greater detail, because we don't have time to unpack all of this. But we then went out and asked fishers themselves, and Indonesia ranks second around the world for the amount of capture fisheries production, and we know that there is a large fishing effort that's underway in Indonesia. We've been working with Indonesian fishers and with Mammal for many years on illegal fishing activities, as well as some of the drivers behind gear loss. And so we went out and actually asked fishers in 7 different countries around the world when and why and how are you losing gear? And we asked for the main fisheries in those countries, gill nets, purseine, long line, pots and traps, and those sorts of things. And what we find, you know, and I think it's important to remember, is fishers do not want to lose their gear. It's time consuming, it's expensive, it's a significant loss to their economy. And so, you know, if we ask why and under what conditions do fishers lose gear, and on the gray side of the responses that they don't lose their gear for that, and then in increasing proportion, do they never, rarely, sometimes, often, or always. So around 20% of gear loss happens during, you know, is it due to wildlife damage? Is it due to problems with your gear? Do you chuck it overboard? Or is it due to, you know, the fishers themselves not doing something properly? And so if you want to unpack a little bit more to understand the drivers behind fishing gear loss, we've done a lot of work to ask fishers at a lot of different points in time, what are those underpinning drivers for that? If you want to understand who in the fishing world is losing their gear as well, in addition to understand which fishery it is, it sometimes is helpful to see, does our fishing gear loss rate relate to how big is the ship or is the boat? And so we asked that question based upon the engine size for fishers using these 5 major gear types as well. And what we can see is that for trawl nets in particular, we have more gear lost with some of the mid-size vessels and the larger vessels as well, and that overall, we probably tend to find more gear loss with larger vessels, although just to be clear, we did normalize that based upon the typical vessel size that's used in different fisheries activities. And I will leave you with this thought in the interest of time. We know now that there is an increasing amount of plastic pollution going into the ocean. We know that fishing effort is increasing through time as well. We know that there's increased pressures on our fishers, on our pelagic, and on our, you know, coastal ecosystems. If and as we start to identify what are the items that are most, whether it's fishing net or rope, whether it's plastic sheeting or thin plastic bags, then we can start to enact those changes. Excuse me, we can put those policies in place to stop the source of the type of litter before it gets out into the marine environment. What species are most at risk within our waters? We have the tools through risk analyses where we can ask those specific questions within a country's waters, within regional waters, etc. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for Dr. Dennis. Very, very informative. And Dr. Dennis, I just would like to ask you, because we have received so many questions and we know we will not have enough time. So if we can know how to reach you, how the participants can ask the question directly if they feel they want more information or the questions are not being read.
No problem. As you can see, my contact details are right there, and I can also share my email address in the chat box if you like.
Okay, and for Professor Rob Macaulay and for Dr. Denise, if you have time, you can also answer on the Q&A box that we have, because there are maybe while you're waiting or if you have spare time. This also will apply to Pak Ben if you're still here, and Ibu Casey. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, let's not waste our time and move to our next speaker. But of course, I would like to read one more fun fact before we start the next session. Although it is called killer whales, orcas are the family of Delphinidae or dolphins. So it's not actually in the family of whale, even though the name is killer whales. Very interesting. Okay, let's move to the last but not least speaker of the day. Can we have the profile bio, the short bio of Dr. Imam Mustafa ready? Yeah, we will be waiting. So Dr. Imam Mustafa will be presenting about endangered, threatened, and protected marine species bycatch. Maybe the profile bio is still waiting. I can read while it's been uploading. Oh, there it is. So, Dr. Imam Mustafa from WWF Indonesia. Imam Mustafa Zainuddin has worked in marine and fisheries conservation programs in Indonesia for more than 15 years. Pak Imam joined WWF Indonesia in 2001. And in the last 5 years, Pak Imam together with his team has succeeded in facilitating the establishment of new marine protected areas, or MPAs, what we know, covering an area of more than 1.5 million hectares in the Sunda Banda seascape and pushing the concept of MPAs for fisheries in Indonesia. He has also successfully initiated and developed a business-to-business platform for the fisheries sector, what's called Seafood Savers, and the marine tourism sector. It's called Signing Blue, which has been recognized by corporations and the public, both at national and international level. Pak Imam is a former member of the Indonesian Tuna Commission for more than 10 years and co-initiator of the National Working Group for Ecosystem Approach to Fisheries Management, EAFFM, co-initiator of the Coral Triangle Fishers Forum, and member of the Indonesian government delegation for international meetings such as SSME, CTI, ASEAN, IOSE, and APEC. He has published more than 15 scientific papers in the field of marine and fisheries conservation. Let's say hi to Pak Imam. Hello, Pak Imam. From the name I know
Halo Ibu.
I can say selamat siang Pak Imam.
Selamat siang Ibu.
Terima kasih Pak Imam. Thank you very much for your time. So without further ado, we would like to ask you to start your presentation. Thank you Pak Imam.
Okay, thank you. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Selamat siang, salam sejahtera. Anyway, could you see my screen? Hello? Hello?
Sudah Pak, tapi belum full.
Okay.
So maybe we can have it full screen.
Oh, full. Okay.
Yes.
Yep, I will.
Let me wait.
Okay.
There.
How about
yes.
now?
Okay. Great. Thank
Okay.
you. Pak.
Yep. So before I start my presentation, so allow me to say thank you very much for KKP and also our colleague from Planet Deep and also distinguished speaker and all the participants. I hope this is the last session, but still can give the information for all of you about endangered, threatened, and protected marine species bycatch. But due to the most discussion on the marine mammal, so I will more focus also for marine mammal. Yeah, so I think bycatch. So many people, I believe, that understand that the bycatch is the unwanted entanglement of animals in fishing gears, and this is considered the greatest global threat to the conservation of ETP marine species, such as marine mammal, sea turtle, seabird, and shark. So many publications already globally, but I believe very few for Indonesian cases. Yeah, and amazing number for global bycatch, for example, like 50,000 leatherback turtle, more than 200,000 loggerhead turtle, and 300,000 whale, and so on and so on. So I think this is one of the major threat for marine species conservation globally, and not only in Indonesia. And in other hand, that most of our fishing gear that have a risk for bycatch. This is very depend on how to operate it, depend on the type of fishing gear and so on. But basically, even hand line also have a risk with different level for many species bycatch. And when if we look for Indonesian cases, so I think this is more logic that Indonesian fishery also high potentially risk to to have the bycatch for this important species, because you know that from WWF research as well, from our satellite tagging and also for our its monitoring and so on. And also I hear from Pak Ben that Indonesia is really a critical habitat for marine mammals, cetacean, and so on. And in other hand, that Indonesia is multi-fishing gear, and more than 600,000 fishing boats operated in Indonesia with several volume or size, that from a small scale into the mid or big scale fishery. And this is typically divide into two, that this is hook and line and also net, especially for cetacean. I think more bycatch occurrence is in a net. I would like to share about our research, the WWF research, that for more than 8 years, in 2006 to 2014, but this is for bycatch monitoring in tuna long line using our onboard observers. And this is dedicated actually to monitor sea turtle, shark, seabird, marine mammal, etc. And but in this case, I would like to more emphasizing information on marine mammal. So we have been able to do the research in long line that based in Benua Bali, that the fishing ground and the dot red over there, this come from the tuna long line that fishing that based in Denpasar, Bali, and also for the yellow one is come from Bitung. And we have been able to observe about more than 8 million of the hook, that usually in tuna long line, one setting in Indonesia is usually 1,000 to 3,000 hook in one setting. And this is just summarized from our research, that basically there is a marine mammal that entangle or bycatch in tuna long line, but if compared with shark and sea turtle, this quite few. But I think based on other our experiences, that this is also maybe the marine mammal that couldn't escape from the hook or entangle, because in other experiences we found several marine mammal when we do necropsy, and there is several hook in their digest system. And I think in tuna long line, marine mammal is still quite safe, because based on our data, that most of the hook or line entangle in their mood or in outside of body, so like in this tail, this is like a hook in their tail. But some cases they do the predation, so they bite or eat tuna that hooked in long line, so they trap it like this too. So I think we still have opportunity to talk with fishermen how to handle and release the fishing gear like this more safely, so to increase the survival rate for this animal. And because also we try to look for other data and information from other fishery, but of course this is quite costly, because in Indonesia many fishing gear. So we try to do monitoring from the citizen volunteerism, that grouping in I am flying vet or first responder, and together with the cetacean partner, we try to recording some of information that indicated that marine mammal is stranded or died, that there is a connectivity with the bycatch issue. So from 2011 to 2021, so at least there is 100 occurrence of marine mammal found alive or dead, which are suspected to be related to bycatch cases. Even this is entanglement or trap or bycatch. And we have a chance to do the necropsy. Like in this case, this is we found this animal is very weak and thin and injured because cookie cutter shark in this area, and when we evacuated, but unfortunately this died already. But we do the necropsy, and there is inside of the system, there is like 3 fishing hook inside of this animal. And also we have some several cases also for this also dolphin, small dolphin. This is trapped in the net and sometimes in the ghost net, that we got a report from fishermen, and or sometimes we found from information from social media and so on. So I think this is only something that we recognize, but I think many cases outside there that we don't recognize yet. Because if we look for the publication from, for example, like if you Googling with Mongabay or others media, we oftenly found the issues and information that like there is a marine mammal trapped in fisherman net and or dugong, and maybe this is one of way that we can start to recognize about the data information on the bycatch marine mammal in Indonesia, because now many opportunity that we have to explore in internet from Instagram or Facebook. Sometimes the people also publish the photo and we can monitor it. But again, that this indicated that fisheries in Indonesia, they're not free for bycatch, and we have to do together about how to gain the solution. But on the other hand, that the fisheries and fishing boat in Indonesia many, so we can do preventive, or we can increase the survival rate for this accident. And it means that we need a lot of effort to do the capacity building to fishermen. That's why then our recommendation, we have to do a lot of awareness and capacity building to fishermen for bycatch mitigation and onboard handling, especially. This is promoting best management practices and optimizing onboard observer. We can combine with onboard observer as the fisheries management tool in this case, because usually we very hard to get the fisherman time when doing the class training. But when the onboard observer have a chance to go to the sea with the fisherman with one fishing trip, there is natural transfer information that they can do how to mitigate the bycatch or do the proper onboard handling, so increase the survival rate. For example, this is one of our onboard observer activity that have discussion and showing the tool for the hooker, for example, in the fisherman. So I think this is one of the things. And of course, we need more explore and adoption of bycatch mitigation technology and innovation. such as circle hook, we have been promoting a lot for circle hook in tuna long line, for example, and we saw the good progress when when the fishermen using circle hook, for example. This is tuna hook, and this is a normal tuna hook, and this circle hook. Why? Because they not reduce the target fish, which is tuna, and usually it's more tight, stronger because locket like this. And but for sea turtle and for seabird and marine mammal, usually they not swallowed into the digest system. So I think based on our research, they can reduce about 40% of bycatch species. And in other hand, we also working together with NOAA to do the trial and adoption and promoting the green light LED for gillnet fishery, as we also understand that the gillnet is high risk to bycatch. So this is one of the thing, and also actually the fishermen happy to have on adopt technology, especially for gillnet fishery, because they are very angry and got a lot of the economic loss when the big mammal or animal trap it in their net and make damage and broken for their gill net. So this is one of our project trial in Paloh. We working with gill net fishery, but we still looking for the technology that more economic wise for green LED, because we imported from US at this moment. Hopefully this is available in Indonesia, and we start working with LED manufacturer in Indonesia for this. So we need a lot of the discussion and research to avoid the bycatch. So I think and also I think we can do with smart gear competition that we did in the past together with we try to mining the idea for the competition that maybe fishermen or scientists have idea how to reducing bycatch, and some of the product now starting to promoting like ESSS, so like electronic silk foresight. Of course, we know that in globally there is an idea like that, but how to adapt with the fishermen operation in Indonesia is very important, because different country, different operational, even in Indonesia, different province is different operating. So this is a kind of the thing to incubate the technology. And the last thing is we have to be smart and always looking for the good opportunity to identify and initiate the incentive for reducing bycatch. So the fishermen also have a commitment to reducing bycatch or applied with the best management practices. Like dolphin-free certification for seafood, and also maybe like now that become mainstreaming in fisheries Indonesia due to the U.S. government Marine Mammal Protection Act, that they try to ensure that all the fisheries that sent to U.S. should be no treat the marine mammal, for example. And even RFMOs, also a regional fisheries management organization, that we know that they have several resolution to also take care about ERS or ecologically related species, including the marine mammal. So maybe the government also can start thinking that maybe the fishermen or the company that allow it for fishing in RFMO's area should be have a commitment to mitigate this bycatch, or also to ensure that their skipper or crew, they have knowledgeable for mitigate the bycatch. So I think that's information that I can provide. Hopefully that we can still working together between fisheries that bring the economic Indonesia rising, because we are one of the big producer fisheries country in the world. And while we also respect and ensure that environmental practices also implemented, because we understand that the species is keystone species for our sustainable fisheries. So it impacted our fisheries. I think we have a lot of information, and maybe we can learn a lot with, for example, like tuna by long line that they only allowed for certain leatherback, for example, in 1 year, if I was not mistaken, for 41 leatherback that caught in long line. If close with the 40%, they will close the tuna long line fishery. That's what I got information from our colleague in NOAA, for example. So I think we have to increase our commitment and wider our approach to fishermen, so we can work together with them. So thanks for everyone that participated until now. Apology if there is something wrong information.
Thank you very much.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you very much for Bapak Imam Mustafa. And we would like to invite Professor Rob, Bapak Imam, of course you are still here, and Ibu Dr. Denise for the next session, which is the question and answer session 2 before we move to the closure event. Once again, we would like to thank you to Professor Robert Macaulay, Dr. Brita Denise Hardesti, and Dr. Imam Mustafa for their amazing presentations. Okay, we have lots and lots of questions coming in. Like we said before, we cannot read all questions, so this time we will read 2 questions each, maybe for each speakers, but we hope you can respond it maybe quickly for the speakers. The first one is for Professor Rob. Now let me flick on my thing. Okay, Professor Rob, the first question is, wow. Dear Sir, can you estimate how far of shock wave impact if some country was tested their military weapon with huge explosion in the ocean? How is the effect to the marine mammals?
Well, first of all, there is a system to detect clandestine nuclear explosions in the world's oceans, and if they get trapped in the deep sound channel, they can travel forever until they land. The effect on marine animals, unless it's within probably 2 kilometres, it's not going to be killed or physiologically impacted, maybe startled. If it's within a few kilometres of a high explosion, be it a harbour explosion, be it a live torpedo perhaps or something, then it's quite likely if it's within 1 to 2 kilometres it will be killed or seriously injured. So I think that answers the question.
Thank you very much, Professor Rob. We will move to Dr. Denise. Are you there? No?
I am indeed, yes.
Yes, okay. So there is a question from Watchara. Sometimes dead turtles or marine mammals stranded with lesions that showed they got entanglement. So how do we separate between marine debris and active fishing gears? Please, Dr. Denise, thank you.
Thank you so much for the question. To answering, can we tell...
We cannot hear you, Dr. Denise, sorry.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, yes.
I think it's an interesting question, and it's a little bit difficult, is the answer, really. Unless a trap or a pot or a line is marked, as active gear in some ways, it can be very difficult to tell that gear is active or passively fishing. And so one way that we can sometimes tell is if there are barnacles or other signs that nets or lines or pots or traps have been in the water for an extended period of time, which we call the soak time. And sometimes then we can make a good prediction or a good, guesstimate that line is then ghost fishing. Although because we can find nets and lines have been repaired, there may be different aged in different types of nets and lines that are used in a single situation. So it can be difficult at times to tell whether the line or net that has caught an animal is being actively fished at the moment, or if it is ghost fishing, or if it is derelict.
Thank you very much, Dr. Denise. Now we will move to Pak Imam. Very short questions. Hi, Pak Imam. From KKP staff Ngurah and Wiadnyana, I think from Bali. The circle hooks have been introduced since several years ago. So the use of circle hooks for tuna longline in Indonesia, is it under the Indonesian policy?
Yeah, actually, Pak Ngurah is my friend. Since beginning, we promoting the circle hook in 2004, 2005. Yeah, and as we know that we got a challenge from the fishermen that the fishermen quite worries about the shape of circle hook until they are really test the circle hook, and we have been successful. At that time, there is several fishing trip with circle hook, and they talk each other and they are adopted. And at that moment, we try to bring in the policy work, but I think this is unfinished work, and I think we if the KKP want to get more information, we can continue this work, Pak Ngurah, and because based on our study and also fishermen witnesses that have been tried the circle hook, they are happy with that. But for the beginning introduction, this is always challenging because we understand that tuna long line is a big investment and many risks for losing the cat is goes to the captain boat. So that's why this is very important. We can convince them, but there is opportunity to go there, Pak Ngurah. So let's work together again, Pak Ngurah, to continue the work. Okay. And yeah, last thing, because the tuna long line in the last couple of years they got bad condition, they couldn't fishing and so on. So they are very now starting again. So I think this time to work again. Over.
Thank you very much, Pak Imam. Very comprehensive answer. We will move to the last question to Pak Professor Macaulay. So this is from Novel Desra Suheri asking, the underwater of ocean is certainly not a quiet environment. Surely there has been ambient noise under the sea. How to identify that the existing value of ambient noise is not harmful to mammals, and how to set the threshold of noise value from certain man-made activity that can be generated? And the last thing, Professor Macaulay, maybe you can inform if there are participants who would like to reach you personally because they want to know more information or the questions hasn't been answered. Thank you.
Okay, first of all, if you want to contact me, my email address is on the Curtin University website, which is www.curtin.edu.au. And then for the question of how do we work out thresholds of response, you do that from experiments with caged or wild animals ideally, but it's very hard to get thresholds for ocean environments for continual noise, for port noise or shipping noise. It's hard to say what is a damaging noise in those cases.
Yeah.
It does appear that some animals tolerate a lot of noise because the ocean itself is a very noisy place. And so it's much noisier than in air, what we're used to. The noise levels can range from very low to the normal high would be typically standing by a busy highway with trucks roaring past, and that's the normal range that they're used to, and they have all sorts of techniques to adapt. So what is a damaging noise level? It's hard to say. People have put numbers to it, and there are a number of those tables around. You can look for various places, noise thresholds. There are endless arguments over what the correct thresholds are. You can certainly get the correct thresholds for physiological damage and for physical damage, but for the more masking, for behavioural responses, it becomes a bit more problematic. So it's just going to be done eventually by observations of how marine mammals respond in different environments with different noise scenarios. And I will add there, it's now relatively routine for ambient noise measurements to be done over the long term. We routinely do, say, 12-month or 2-year ambient background noise measurements for different locations, so we have a handle on what the noise levels are normally like. I'll leave it there. It's a very difficult question to answer, and lots of people have tried, and there are tables around, and that's the best we can do at the moment. So I'll stop there.
Thank you very much, Professor Macaulay. Now we will move to Dr. Denise. This is very short questions, but very comprehensive, I think, to answer. Dr. Denise, thank you for the explanation. Now the question is, where the marine debris mostly come from? Is it from the ship or is it from the land?
That's a really good question again. So most of the trash that ends up in our ocean tends to come from land. And we estimate that around 80% is coming from land. Now, this is really different in areas where there's lots of fishing activity or in remote communities where we tend to find much more fishing associated or related. So marine sources of litter in the ocean include not only fishing vessels, but recreational vessels, transport cargo vessels, and all sorts of other transport vessels that we find out at sea in the ocean. So I'll leave it there in the interest of time. Thank you so much for the question.
Thank you very much, Dr. Denise, for your time. And the last but not least, again, the last question for Dr. Imam. Why Indonesian fishermen using green LED for gill net? Are there some research related to this? And how about the pinger where some fishermen use it? Thank you.
Yeah, actually, this come from our conservation work in several major nesting bits for sea turtle. That there is gill net, small scale gill net fishery operated over there, and we saw quite high interaction with sea turtle, and they are also complaining that sea turtle make their net broken. So that's why we try to explore and communicate this one with our colleague in NOAA, in NMFS at that moment, and and we agreed that let's try with the LED net, because in other research this is quite successful, and we bring this technology to this fisherman group, and they are quite happy about that, because first they can reduce about 60% of sea turtle bycatch in gill net, and it means that they can avoid cost that not necessary, because their fishing gear damaged. But I think, and while that their target catch is still managed well, not reduce it. Yeah. So I think this is one of the ideal condition that we can pursue it and promote it to others area. But now the problem is how to make this technology available in Indonesia and more reachable by the small scale fishermen, for example. So there is something that technology is one thing, but another that we have to think also about the what you call it, adoption for small scale. And based on the data also from many fishing trips that we did, until now, no report from the fishermen that they also caught dolphin or also marine mammal. That maybe this is one more opportunity also that we can look more deeply if this is also relevant for reducing bycatch in marine mammal. Pinger, actually, we also try to look at technology, but I think we need more time and also need more advice and discussion with more scientists regarding how to do this pinger, because again there is pro and cons, but as a conservation organization we always looking for that the ecosystem impact and also for the economic wise for fishermen as well. But I think pingers many publication that's showing the good result as well. So I think it's worth it to test in Indonesia, as Indonesia have a lot of gill net fishery in small and big scale as well, with only several meter until the 1 kilometer for long drifting gill net, for example, for pelagic fishery. So a lot of homework for Indonesia, and we are ready to work together. Thank you.
Thank you, Bapak Imam. And where best to reach you?
Yeah, so you can reach me through the email in Mustafa at wwf.id.
Okay, thank you very much. So we would like to close the presentation session 2, and we would like to say thank you very much once again for Professor Robert Macaulay, for Dr. Brita Dennis Hardesti, and for Dr. Imam Mustafa for your time, for your information, the knowledge shared, and also your effort in making sure that the world is better. And also, we will not forget to say thank you very much for Bapak Benjamin Khan, MSc, and as well as Ibu Dr. Kathy George. Thank you very much. We hope you will still be with us until the closing event, and we wish you all the best and have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for still being with us. We have heard 5 amazing presentations. Our knowledge is enriched now, and I hope you guys can stay until the rest of the event, because we are going to enter the closing event soon. One thing I would like to remind you that I saw that the committee, the organizing member, already put the link for attendance list and also materials in the chat room. So I have read lots of questions related to materials and attendance list, so now you can fill the form. Okay? Okay. Before we move to the closing event, I will read the last fun fact of the day. So, all of us must have seen a pod of dolphins swim chasing the cruise ship, maybe like in the TV or in YouTube. Do you know that common dolphin swimming speed can reach up to 64 kilometers per hour? 64. Meanwhile, the average speed of cruise ship is around 37 kilometers per hour, so almost half. So they're like twice faster. I can only do maybe 3, maximum 5 kilometers per hour. That's me. Thank you very much. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we will now move to the closure event of the seminar. We would like to welcome Bapak Insinyur Andi Rusandi MSI and Bapak Dr. Hendra Yusran Siri to the front. Thank you very much. Yeah, we have 2 very highly dedicated person related to the marine mammals here. Okay, let us now hear from Bapak Insinyur Andi Rusandi MSI, the Director of Marine Conservation and Biodiversity of MMAF Indonesia, for the wrap-up. Now, just as you know, Bapak Andi has been dedicating his time since day one of the preparation, I know that, and even until last night, very late, he stayed with us. Thank you, Bapak Andi, the time is yours.
Thank you, Suci. Excellency, expert to the Minister Ibu Dr. Pamuji Lestari, Excellency Acting DG of Marine Spatial Management Bapak Dr. Hendra Yusran Siri, distinguished panelists, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. I can see everyone is very excited with our event today, both in Zoom and YouTube. Thus, I would take this opportunity to thank all the panelists and participants for joining us today. As the Director of Marine Conservation and Biodiversity, I would like to wrap up general ideas of our discussion today as follows. Indonesian waters play an important role in the protection and conservation of marine mammals, as it's home to various marine mammal species. Marine mammals are prone to various threats as they naturally have slow reproduction. This situation is worsened by man-made activities like marine debris and ocean noise. Indonesia is the fourth most populated country in the world. This created a potential of intense pressure and threat to marine resources and access, including marine mammals such as dugong, dolphin, and whales. Our discussion today emphasizes that marine debris and ocean noise are two most common anthropological threats to marine mammal in Indonesia, which potentially causing various stranding incidents all over the country. We also identified that marine debris is the silent killer of marine mammals. It can lead to acute and chronic physical condition. Unfortunately, the marine debris also come from discarded fishing gears that are no longer used by fishermen. Kathy's presentation underscored that more than 640,000 tons fishing gears are ended up as ghost nets in the ocean every year. We also learned today that bycatch from captured fisheries may also become threat to marine mammals. Therefore, our panelist, Dr. Imam Mustafa, emphasizes the urgent need to use technology in mitigating bycatch events to marine species, particularly the marine mammals. The ocean noise that comes from seismic and human activities on the sea may damage their hearing, which is very important to the echolocation that help them to navigate, hunt, and communicate with their pod. This identified threat do not only occur in Indonesia, but also happen in all parts of the ocean in the world. There have been actions in Indonesia and the world to combat this threat, particularly the marine debris threat. In Indonesia, we have the new Indonesia National Plastic Action Partnership in 2020 and the commitment of Indonesia to reduce 70% of plastic debris by 2025 under the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. While on international scale, we know from Ms. Katie that there is the global and national entanglement response network that strive to save marine mammals from entanglement of marine debris. This movement continuing with further study on the mitigation effort can also be an example for Indonesia. In fact, we already have more than 1,300 first responders that are already trained to handle stranding incident of marine megafauna, and 55 FET that become member of I'm Flying FET, a FET association that is training to give medical treatment to marine megafauna voluntarily. A risk-based approach to marine debris is also important to understand the source of drivers of the debris and impact of it. This information will be valuable information to design the best management responses to the marine mammal that are affected. Everyone, this system can also be implemented in the ocean noise issue. The government of Indonesia, supported by partners, has a strong yet a growing commitment to sustain marine mammals' life. One commitment I would underscore is that we are on our way to develop and manage approximately 10% of Indonesia waters and marine protected area. That way, marine mammals habitat are having better protection and management. Finally, we do really hope this seminar can raise more awareness on marine mammals conservation, especially after acknowledging the threat we as humankind of unintentionally have created to marine mammal. Let's save our environment and keep up the conservation spirit. Have a good day. Thank you.
Thank you very much to Bapak Insinyur Andi Rusandi. Now, ladies and gentlemen, let us hear the closing remarks by Bapak Dr. Hendra Yusransiri, the Acting Director General of Marine Spatial Management of MMAF Indonesia.
Right, thank you, Suchi, for the time. So first of all, I would like to thanks to all panelists and participants. Very interactive presentation, and as well also the interactive discussions with I think it's first Dr. Katie, Pak Ben, Professor McCulley, Dr. Dennis, and as well also Pak Imam. I think this is really provide an insightful experience learning from the expert. That's really something that we really appreciate for that one. So, and I think what Pa Andi already mentioned is here, so we can see that we have learned today many man-made activities, are both direct or indirect impact to the marine life, particularly to the marine mammals. So I noted that there are three, at least what Pa Andi mentioned here, the threat that have been identified in the wrap-up sessions. First, what we call this is ocean noise. I think we cannot avoid that. We have many economic activities that need some seismic activities that probably will impact, and also from other economic activities. And the second point is related to the marine debris, which is, as a panelist mentioned, that this is a land-based sources, so we need to address it. And the third point is that bycatch. I think this is what we call this unwanted from the fishing industries, entanglement as well as for the bycatch. So we need to, to make sure that I think Pa Imam has already mentioned the last session how the important turtle, what you call this excluded device or other device that can be more friendly to the marine mammals. So it's really important. So, ladies and gentlemen, Excellency Bu Tari, and I would like to mention here, we have to have follow-up activity after this international seminar. First, Indonesia will continue to implement the National Action Plan of Action for the marine mammals until 2020. Second, Indonesia will continue to widespread initiative to reduce marine debris throughout the nation. I think I would like to mention here, we have the national target to reduce by 25% very soon, so we hope we can achieve that for the target. The third point, the last point, Indonesia will work together with the global actions, save the marine mammals, as the species also part of both regional and global concern. Marine mammal, like human mammals, we need to avoid any disturbance for our life. So that's why we're really important. So by having that, I would like to conclude my remark for the closing remark. And I would like to declare officially as Acting Director General for the Marine Special Management, I cordially closing this seminar, and thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Bapak Dr. Hendra Yusran Siri, who has been here since a very early morning today and opening and closing our event. So, ladies and gentlemen, now we have arrived to the end part of the event. We would like to say thank you very much for your participation today. Thank you to the organizing committee, MMAF of Indonesia, WWFID, Planet Deep, and also participants, and for sure all our speakers. Personally, I would like to apologize for all the mistakes. Before we say goodbye, I would like to read pantun, which is one of Indonesian style poetry. Indonesia tanah surgawi, indahnya lautan sungguhlah memikat hati. Populasi mamalia adalah kunci, mari kita jaga sepenuh hati. Paus dan lumba-lumba terus bermigrasi, pergerakannya tersebar di pelosok negeri. Pelestarian mamalia laut mengajak kita untuk peduli. Mari bersama kita lindungi. Once again, thank you very much. Stay safe, stay healthy. Have a great day. Me, Suci Lenden, would like to say thank you. Wabillahi taufik wal hidayah. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Additional information for participants who haven't filled